Good afternoon, beautiful people. Seth Andrews with Paulogia for the Sunday show. Hey, Paul, always good to see you, my friend.
And a pleasure to see you as well. I'm excited to hang with you this afternoon and our callers.
Just had a conversation with someone about how much do you love getting your Sunday mornings back? Because you and I both came out of Fundy Christianity, and I remember it was always like a thing. And back when I was a kid, you had to actually dress up. This was before the come as you are, no matter
Right.
how
Absolutely.
raggedy your clothes are and how many tats you got and how messed up your hair is. And if you've showered for a week, just come, man. In fact, the more unkept you are, maybe the better it is. But back then, it was a process. You get up and you had to wear slacks, no jeans. I can't remember if I wore a necktie as a kid, but it was a big deal, and we would go. And I remember when it was finally over and we listened and the Baptist churches were fine because you knew they were exactly 59 minutes and 59 seconds and it would be over, because they had a clock in the back they had a clock in the back, and Baptists are on schedule and the people get pissed if you go over because they have brunch plans. But at the Pentecostal church, Jesus, if you pardon the expression, it was always like, let me, I'm going to have an altar call. Let's do another stanza because I know someone in this place is going to make a decision for the Lord. And, the sermons would go on for 45 minutes or an hour. Some churches had more than one pastor. And I remember at the very end when it was finally over and we were dismissed, I just felt this relief. Oh, it's over. I'm off the freaking hook till next Sunday. Oh, what a relief. And so now as an atheist, I'm like, I get to feel that all morning. In fact, I get to feel it 7 days a week, 24/7. Paul, do you ever have that sensation?
Well, first of all, I'm judging you now because you didn't go to Sunday night church.
Well, I did when I had a girlfriend.
You were not a real Christian. I missed. So there was a show on TV called Wonderful World of Disney that was on Sunday evenings. And I so rarely got to watch it. And dating myself, this is like pre-access to DVRs and even VHS tapes. So man, I just hated Sunday evening church even more. But the Sunday morning thing, huge relief, especially when I was in the era where I was taking 3 children to church in the morning. So you had to back that up because they all had to be Sunday best. That's not a phrase people use. Do they use that anymore? Sunday best?
I don't know. I haven't heard it in almost, I think, in decades. But yeah, it was no jeans, had to be slacks. You had to be prim and proper, not a hair out of place, because you're going to meet Jesus, and you don't go half-ass when you're going to go meet Jesus. You got to look proper, right?
That was also frustrating as a teen because my parents were school teachers, so budget was limited always. But the expensive clothes had to go to the set you just wore that one day. So that left less clothing budget for, your week, day in, day out, week stuff. It's a whole thing. I hadn't even thought about what a relief it is. Yeah, amazing.
It is a relief. Now, my attendance was perfect when my girlfriend went to the same church, because that's one of the ways we got to see each other. So I knew, well, she'd be there Sunday night, and then we'd make an excuse to be there Wednesday night. Sometimes we'd sneak out. And then we had the revivals. And for those who don't know what revival is, that's a real joy. It's when they bring in some guest pastor to give the church a shot in the arm. So it's not the pastor everybody's used to. Now it's going to be some dude who usually travels the country, and his whole shtick is he comes in and he gets everybody all worked up. And revival, hell, that's every night. That's every night for like a week, maybe 2 weeks. You're just exhausted when it's over. I don't know if we were revived or not. But anyway, that takes me back. No shit, Paul. My family was so fundamentalist and so hardcore when I was a kid that if we were sick or if we overslept and for some reason didn't get out the door for church, Mom would make us sit in front of the television and watch television church. We had to watch 2 or maybe even 3 services from different preachers on TV. If there is a hell, it is church on TV. So, yes, I am liberated. Like that Lord of the Rings line, breathe the free air, my friend. How are things up in Canada? How are you guys peering down the
We
border at
are.
us, wondering if we're going to survive the next 60 days or what?
You've got that super real, yeah, that cool reality show that we're all watching up here. That election to your new season it's really fascinating. You brought in a new character, and it really freshened up the show. I used to think I knew where it was heading. Now who knows what's going to happen? I think it's going to come
No,
down to that finale night. But
I was going to just dig a hole, you know. I was just going to dig a hole and then ask somebody to cover the hole. You know, and so I don't know how much we talk politics. I will say I just came off of a Facebook thread. This is one of the reasons I have a hard time in comment sections because I'm fielding comments from people who are saying that the parties, the platforms, the values are all equivalent. And I just think, on what
mm,
freaking planet? And no one's saying that. I mean, I'm a proud liberal. No one's saying that we don't have a lot of problems. No one's saying that it is a perfect platform. No one's saying that there aren't serious issues that need to be addressed. But there's this sort of bland, blah, well, they're all equally bad. I'm just going to opt out, or I'm going to go over here in my corner and I'm going to feel noble about not participating, and I won't be vote shamed. And I think, how in the world can you look at the assault on state church separation? How can you look at the vilification of immigrants? Hell, we just saw it this week with the Haitian immigrants supposedly kidnapping everybody's pets and eating their dogs and cats. And you got Vance calling them, he admits that they're documented here legally, and yet he still insists on calling them illegals. It's total xenophobia, total racism. How can you look at the sexism? How can you look at the scheming? How can you look at the corruption and the transactional nature of all the shit that's going on and say it's remotely equivalent? And I can't decide where these people are coming from. Do they also live in an alternate reality, or are they just looking for an excuse to take their ball and go home and not play the game at all? I don't know. The argument is, well, if you participate in the process, then you are enabling a two-party system that's broken to begin with. So maybe the way to win is to not play. Have you heard that one at all from
I have
above
heard that
the?
one. My I was raised though absolutely. I've voted in every election I've been eligible for. That you don't get to complain if you didn't vote, and I feel like. And I've actually asked people before, did you vote in the last election? Did you vote in the one before? Then I'm done listening to your complaints because you did absolutely nothing about it. But I do sometimes fear, like there are countries where voting is mandatory, right? Like, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Is it Australia? I forget.
I can't
And I
remember
do
either.
think it seems like it would be worse though, right? To have mandatory voting, like to drag people who are like in that kind of mindset where there's no difference. Like maybe I'm happy those people are staying home.
I don't
Maybe
know.
we'd rather
I don't
have
know.
the interested parties making the
Oh, and I've
decisions.
got
I
somebody
don't
in the
know.
comments section who's saying, "Well, I love your show, but I couldn't care less about your politics." Let me tell you something. Everything is political. Everything. When you walk out the door, what you're able to do, who you can speak to, what kind of job you can have, what you may get paid, whether or not you are living in a theocracy, the statuses, the acceptance or rejection of your fellow human beings, be they women or LGBT people or people of color or whatever, all of it is political. It is such a position of privilege, I think, or just ignorance, naivety, perhaps, to say, "Well, I don't want to talk politics." It's all political. It all comes to bear. Well, can we talk about religion or politics things, especially in a time when Christian nationalists and Project 2025 and the Theocrats and the Heritage Foundation and everybody else, they're all just looming. They're salivating, trying to strip the rights of all the others away, even some Christians away, those who are more moderate and progressive, and to say, well, I'm just not political. That's a position of privilege or monumental childlike naivety. And I stand totally against it because I really think everything is political in some way. Back me up, Paul. Am I correct on that?
You're absolutely correct, and even if not so, I listen to I listen to apologists more than any healthy person should, and they have shifted their programming all summer long and will continue. They're not covering this New Testament book or that New Testament book or an interpretation or scrolls. Their entire programming right now is anti-woke, got to get out the vote. There was even an apologist this last week was like, even if you set abortion aside, here are the top 10 reasons why, Democrats are bad. And I've also seen some, but it's just some Christians will vote on the other side. Absolutely. I've seen the flip side. But to pretend that religion and politics are separate questions, especially right now in America, is just to be naive. So I am looking forward to, let's say, February. Maybe things will be calm. Hopefully, there'll be a peaceful transition of power of some sort, and we can get back to just the hard nosed Kalam version 97, whatever. But anyway, but if you want, if you out there are tired of talking about politics and want to just pose us those theological questions, the callers drive the subjects of what we talk about. So it's easy to keep us away from it if you want to.
I'm excited on a lighter note about the fact that today's the first day we haven't had 98 degrees in mid-September, and I don't know how long. We're heading into fall. I'm preparing on my own show an annual tradition, which is our Ghost Stories podcast. So I've been working on. Actually, I'm wearing my Fangoria because I'm a big horror movie guy, and including 80s horror, which is kind of my thing. And I'm interviewing Phil Noble Jr., who's the editor-in-chief of Fangoria magazine. He's going to be on my show. I can't believe he agreed. I just said, look, I do an atheist show, but I want to do an off-topic, kind of a one-off about horror films. And he's like, great. I don't know where I get the vibe. He's an atheist. So he's going to come join me, and then we're doing ghost stories. I've been working on that, and then we're getting the Halloween decorations ready. We're doing a riff. It's not a scary theme. We're doing a riff on the Wizard of Oz. So I'm building an actual neon rainbow.
Oh, awesome.
That the kids will walk under the rainbow on the yellow brick road to receive their candies. And one of our friends is coming over.
Is this a promise not to flood the world rainbow, or one of those pride rainbows?
No. This is not a biblical rainbow. There will be no vengeance or punishment or regret involved with my rainbow. Anyway, the switchboard is populating.
Just on that last note, I need to know: have you seen the Late Night with the Devil? The new film, Late Night with the Devil?
No, and the only reason I haven't, because it's streaming on Shudder, which is a horror movie a service I subscribe to, is that I'm actually having some friends over. We're going to make it a party and watch it together. Perfect.
But
I hear it's quite good.
I wanted to put that into your mix if you hadn't already. Perfect.
Okay, all right. Another digression from politics into 80s horror. Sorry for thanks for indulging. Let's see what we've got here on the caller line. Steve, is it Steve out of Nebraska? Steve is apparently atheist. Are you with us, my friend?
Hi, Seth, whose Judaic name comes from the third son of the Elohim's bioengineered millennial lasting Adam and Eve. And hi, Paul, whose Christian name was popularized by Apostle Paul, who wrote a quarter of the New Testament. So how are you guys with such amazingly beautiful biblical names doing today?
I like to tell people that I'm named after the one son of Adam and Eve that wasn't involved in a homicide. That's always a nice way to lead with Seth, I think.
You were a replacement for Abel. Yes, your namesake was a replacement for Abel. And then my biblical namesake, Stephen, got stoned. Perhaps
I was going to say you're the first martyr.
Wacky tobacco going on there in the Bible.
Indeed.
Wacky tobacco and stoning. Okay, I just made the connection. What's on your mind? What do you want to talk about, Steve?
Well, yeah. All kidding aside, in all seriousness, I'd like to discuss evidence of there being an informational dynamic entity guiding genetic mutations and evolution with an orderly topic bias towards conserving computational resources.
Jesus Christ.
Of this
Steve, hang on. Can you do me a favor? Talk to me like you would a child. All right. I want you to use smaller words, and I want you to communicate that again for me so I can play along. Okay?
Okay, sure. So there's evidence in observational data of the SARS-2 variants, and it's kind of it's a really kind of a eccentric, detailed discussion of a study done. So maybe it'd be a little bit too much for your audiences. Forrest Valkai, he would be one that I should probably talk to about this. Is he going to be on your show sometime soon?
I'm sure that he is. I don't see him on the immediate schedule, but all of us need to be able to understand these proofs for God for them to be an effective proof, right? If God is truly benevolent, he's not going to make it so esoteric that the rest of us, those of us who are just slobs down here in the trough, can't figure it out. He wants us all to understand. Explain it to us, Steve.
Okay. So there was this study, and they looked at the RNA sequencing, and they observed the infodynamics of the mutations, and they show that the information is becoming more orderly over time. It's going the opposite direction of the second law of thermodynamics or infodynamics. The information tends to becoming more compressed and more orderly over time, or so it seems to be going in a way to conserve computational resources. And this study is done in the second law of infodynamics and its implications, the simulated universe hypothesis, authored by Dr. Melvin Bopson.
The entropy argument doesn't really fly, because we would only see more entropy, we would only see more chaos in a closed system. The second law of thermodynamics is talking about a closed system, but the Earth is not a closed system as we receive exterior energy from the sun. So the appearance of order or organization is actually not a surprise.
And what does informational? What does in? Hold on, Steve. Yeah. What exactly is informational entropy? How? So
okay.
I don't think this study.
Google that here. Hold on, so I could get it right.
No. This isn't the Google show.
Yeah.
You called in to tell us that in this study, information was getting more organized, and I don't know in the concept of a SARS virus what information looks like, and how anyone stares at a gene and says, "Well, this one's more organized than that gene sequence." I've never heard that phrase "organized" used with
so information
genetics.
can be quantified in a binary information system into bits. And when they looked at the SARS variants information entropy, they observed it decreasing at 0.00152 bits.
No. What's the it in that sentence? We observed it decrease. What's the it?
The it is the information. So information dynamics want me to explain.
So can you not? So did you call in and you cannot explain to us what organized information looks like versus disorganized information?
Well, it becomes more efficiently described over time.
What does that look like?
Well, it would be would get more information content per probable information outcome.
I feel like I'm listening to a random term generator here. Steve, let's take a leap real fast, because I am guessing that you are talking about evidence for some outside organizer, right? Is that correct? Do you believe there is an entity, an agency, which is behind this organization?
Right. The simulation were simulated by artificial intelligence.
Oh, wait, hang on. So you're not talking about a deity. You believe that it's all being organized by AI?
That's what I believe. I can't, of course, know that for sure. That's my suspicion.
Okay, so you're calling to tell us to make a point based on a suspicion?
Well, I think there are. Well, I do have. Okay, I have to admit, I do have, and I'll confess this. I do have some confirmation bias towards us being simulated, and this largely formed on July 1st, when within minutes of me having read this proposed experiment by Dr. Bobson, I was nearly struck down by lightning on the north lawn of the Papillion Library. And as the storm raged past me, I was thinking, perhaps we simulated beings ought not put our God-forsaken simulated universe to the test. And then as that thought occurred, a rainbow appeared to me in the sky. Then subsequently, this crowdfunding campaign for this proposed experiment to test the simulation hypothesis has been defunded. And then for it is written in Luke 4:12, do not put the Lord thy God to the test. Luke, I am your father. So that makes me think that maybe there's something going on here.
Steve, I'm good. There are dots. None of them are connecting. Paul, do you have anything else before I move on? You good?
I now suspect that this is not a legitimate caller.
Yeah.
But
Steve,
the Luke, I am your father
you very
part,
much.
So
have a good day. We'll see you later. Yeah, I don't find any utility in pursuing that. There wasn't even a premise. I've got Sura out of India. Did I get that right? Am I saying it right? Sura?
Yes.
We don't have a great connection, it sounds like, but let's do what we can. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
No, you both are born in United States and North America. You are gifted that democracy is very government is good. You have some freedom to choose atheism as a religion.
Sura, back off from the telephone. You are distorting, which may not be your fault because we have an international connection, but put the phone further away from your mouth and speak a little more softly, and let's try one more time. What did you want to say?
No, your people are gifted to be in United States, born in United States. You have freedom to choose atheism or religion, but in India it is very difficult. If you start a call-in studio for atheism, religious people will vandalize and destroy the studio.
I have no idea, Paul. Are you catching any of that?
So what I've heard so far was that he said because we were born in America, which I'm not, but that's close enough. I'm Canada, so it's close enough, that we are able to have a call-in show like this. We have the freedom to discuss atheism. I believe Sura is trying to say that in his country, if they were to start a call-in show, the studio would be attacked. That he lives in such a place that he doesn't have the freedom to do that. I don't know if that's the case or not, and I don't know what the follow-up would be, but that's what I've gleaned so far. Is that correct, Sura?
Yes.
So, were you calling to? Did you have a question or beyond the observation?
No. Do you have any plans to start a studio in India?
Well, apparently we'll be killed, according to you, or imprisoned or something. So, that's... hang on just a second, though. If I can comment, I'm looking at the description on the call-in studio switchboard. It says, atheism is impossible in India. I'm guessing what you meant is you believe that being a public atheist activist, wearing it on your sleeves, could be dangerous. And again, I'm with Paul. I don't know that. But I will say that atheism is extremely possible in India, because whether or not you believe in God happens under your skin. It is a product of your own mind, your own belief system. And they're in high control, theocratic Islamic nations are a great example. there's an underground of a ton of people who don't believe in Allah. They are atheists, even if they cannot wear it on their sleeves. So no one can enslave your mind like that. And in that way, you can remain free. And it's my hope the culture itself will soon follow. Okay?
Okay, but you talk about many bad things about Jesus, right? But if you talk about Hindu gods, even a little bit of bad things, any positive criticism also is not acceptable for those religious people. So it is. No, I don't know how
One thing from my Christian upbringing and the path that I thought my life was on for most of my life was that I believed that missionary journeys were good. That North Americans trying to learn another culture and then going to that culture to try to preach Jesus was a good way of spreading things. Now, it turns out, in retrospect, that is actually not a great way to reach people. It's a very expensive way to do it, and it doesn't gain much traction. Because of course, the cultural divide, as you rightly say, the cultural differences are great. So Seth and I could fly to India, next month and start a show, but we know next to nothing about the kind of arguments that are made at a popular level. I couldn't name more than 2 or 3 Hindu gods. I just wouldn't be able to argue effectively, even if I had a great translator. It's just not where we're at. And it's part of the reason why I try and stay in my lane with Christianity. And people say, well, hey, why don't you talk about Islam more, other religions more? I'm like, well, because I am uniquely qualified because I came out of Christianity to talk about Christianity. So I feel like the best course, I empathize with you, but I'm guessing that outsiders like Seth and I starting a call-in show in India probably would have very little traction because they would write us off as outsiders who don't know about anything. So what I hope for you and for your culture, your country, is that slowly over time, and hopefully quickly over time, people like yourself from the culture will be able to have more and more freedom and more boldness to say that you're an atheist. In Seth and my lifetimes, saying an atheist when we were children would have probably got us beat up as well. At least in where I lived, it definitely would have. So I guess I'm not convinced that you need outside help. What we will hope for you, and I think I hope atheists around the world would support you, is to do your own local thing and get that grassroots thing going. That's a bit of a anti-missionary tangent that I went on there for a bit. But Seth, did you have anything to add?
I think you covered it, my friend. Sura, anything else before we move on?
No, I feel that there is something mystery in India that is making people follow religion very deeply. So I feel that there is something divine in India that's why we don't have any. The percentage of atheism is less than 1%.
We have a
What
lot
is
of
your opinion on that?
religiosity. We have religiosity in nations all over the world. Would that imply something divine is going on?
No, but in India, atheism is just below 1%.
Well, atheism, yes. In fact, I've pulled up some information I'm going to read cold, but it comes from the Associated Press, and we'll see if we can give ourselves and everybody a kind of a primer on this because you've got me curious. Sura, you are much appreciated. Thanks for calling, and be safe and well, okay?
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Sorry about the quality of that call. This is from the Associated Press, India, published October 5th of last year. Non-religious struggle to find their voice and place in Indian society and politics. Just a couple of paragraphs for grins. Despite India's millennia-old history of non-religious movements, most atheists and rationalists choose to keep quiet about their skepticism of faith. It's easier and far less risky than going public in one of the world's most religious countries. The space that does exist for debating religious authority and belief is shrinking, said Avinash Patel, a religious skeptic who was born Hindu and is now a leader of an anti-superstition group working in one of the country's western states. He blames the growth of nationwide religious and communal tensions over the last decade, as well as rising Hindu nationalism under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership. So apparently, Sura is telling us the truth. It is a very religious nation. It is difficult to be irreligious, at least publicly. I don't know about endangerments. I'm not familiar enough with it to be able to comment on whether or not we were to start a broadcast or go public or hold a placard on a city street and fear for our safety. So I can't speak to that. I don't know. Any other thoughts, Paul, before I move on?
Nope.
You mentioned Canada again. I just have to digress. I saw somebody wore a t-shirt one. There are two competing t-shirts about the US and Canada that made me laugh. And I think you and I should buy one and wear one, maybe at a party. The American version says Canada, America's hat. And the Canadian's wearing a t-shirt that says America, Canada's ass. And I know the U.S. is not America, but that's just colloquially how we talk about it. But it's thought, we're Canada's ass. We're the ass end of Canada, apparently, up down here. So, we do, I think, forget how spoiled we are. I did a whole show 3 years ago about how it's not that we don't have legitimate difficulties. It's not that there aren't people in danger. It's not that we don't have problems with homelessness and poverty and sickness and all education, all these other issues. But sometimes I think in developed nations, we become myopic and we forget really how good we have it. Even our worst is often better than the best that others are having in high control, highly oppressed nations all around the world. And we forget how bad many of our ancestors had it. I'm releasing a speech to YouTube about intelligent design, and we're talking about how just a few hundred years ago, tooth abscesses were the sixth leading cause of death. I mean, it's unheard of in developed nations now that you would die of that. Back then, delivering a baby, good chance you wouldn't survive or the baby wouldn't survive. We didn't know what germs were. We didn't know where diseases came from. We hadn't mapped the genome. Air travel when it was just a fantasy. All of these things that we often take for granted. And it's true, I think, that we in developed nations sometimes, while we're busy whining about how oppressed we are, and we have legitimate problems, we loom under the shadow of Christian nationalists and all those types of things. But we also, I think, have to remember that we've, in many ways, I'm paying an extra $3 or $5 for a dozen eggs. Somebody else doesn't have anything to eat and may starve to death today. And I know it sounds like hyperbole. Paul, do you want to weigh in on any of that? Do you have any thoughts? I would welcome them if you do.
Just on our general luck. No, but I do. Obviously, I think I do think about that often with my content. Is that like you have to actually have some freedom and some safety, food safety, all these things for the stuff that I talk about to even be a consideration in your life. I know that obviously when you're the poor and the destitute will often cry out to God, but they're not thinking about whether the Kalam cosmological argument is a good reason for them to think God will pull them up out of their circumstances. So I get that privilege for sure. And I do kind of want to reiterate though that even 1950s, 1960s, to be a vocal atheist, you weren't going to get injured in Western society here, but that would have eliminated you from running for office, for example, or that would have eliminated you from a lot of jobs. You would have been there would have been consequences to making those kind of declarations that, frankly, I'm appreciative that in the time where I became an atheist. Those are not my consequences. But just to encourage, those in other countries that are behind that curve, it is possible that the society will catch up and help that way. So we're looking for the Star Trek future, not the Dune future.
I think there are some states in my country that still have laws on the books. They're like the blue laws in some cases that are largely ignored. But I think there are some places where it is still illegal for an atheist to run for office. I know that discrimination often happens between the letters of the law. So it's like saying, well, racism is solved because we have anti discrimination policies and laws in place. But that's not how racism works. Like somebody who's a racist says, well, I fired that person because of poor communication skills. But the truth was, they were fired because of the color of their skin. And that's how discrimination often works. There was a study that came out 15 years ago where at the time it said that the American public trusted atheists less than they would trust rapists. And I think that may have shifted. I think finally we are above rapists rather in the hierarchy. I don't know. I do know that we are seeing some secular political candidates, humanist political candidates, non-religious political candidates begin to get noticed on the American radar. That may signify a sea change. I don't know, my friend. I think it's chess, not checkers. So I do have high hopes that at the grassroots level, what we're thinking, feeling, doing, believing and not believing will be reflected in the leaders that we elect in the coming years and decades. I've got, oh, Jesus, I see Matthew. Matthew, you've called 21 times, and the last call was 2 weeks ago. So I'm hesitant to put you back on the air. I'm going to pray about it. Okay? I'm going to pray about it. Instead, let's talk to Jim out of Ohio. Jim, are you there?
Yeah, hi. And by the way, I understand you're having some problems with your phone or something. If it means anything, I can hear you guys fine.
I think you're good, my friend. Go for it. What's on your mind?
Okay. Well, actually, I have two things. What I called about was one of these shorts that they have on YouTube. It's not like a full video. It's like only like a moment or two, but it doesn't tell the source. I came across one short for you. Excuse me, the line. It sounded interesting, and I would like to see the whole video. All I can get is the caller was Sam, and what I said on the screen was a call for peaceful coexistence. Would you at least have the date for that so I could look it up?
I don't know. There have been a lot of shows. Did you want us to comment on the idea, the hashtag coexist concept? Did you want our opinion, or are you looking for the show?
The show, like I said, it sounded interesting, but it clipped it. Sometimes it'll run, and then you won't get the rest of it. So I just wanted to, I thought it was interesting, so I'd like to see the whole video if possible.
Jim, I think I may punt to the comment section and the producers of the line, and perhaps if they can locate that, they could post it in the comment section, and perhaps you could retrieve it from there. Would that be all right?
Yeah, I'll give it a try. By the way, while I was waiting, I didn't call for this, so I don't want you to think I called to kind of slip something past you, sneak in. I just didn't think about it until I was listening. And by the way, I'm an atheist. I'm not a biblical scholar or anything like that. But sometimes I think about, in the story, in the fable about the Noah's flood, global flood, what happened to the bodies that were left behind when the waters receded? I mean, you probably talk about at least hundreds, if not thousands of corpses. Who buried them? Who cremated them? Or were they just left out there to rot? Because you had, as I understand it, like 8 people, Noah's family. And I'm sure a couple of them were children who wouldn't know, about burying or cremating. I'm just wondering, does anybody say what happened to the bodies that were left when the waters receded? Were they buried? Were they cremated? Or just left to rot?
Paul, the millions of corpses that bumped against the ark, do you have thoughts?
So if I'm going to put on my creationist hat, I believed in your creation up until, a single digit number of years ago. So the idea is that the flood, that much water on the earth, would definitely be churning the what was essentially the sea bottom at that point, right? The whole earth was the sea bottom, and no one's wondering where are all the dead fish, for example, right?
Yeah.
I know some of them get eaten, but like these things naturally in such a churn would have stirred up under the sediment, and that is actually the creationist argument. They argue that all of the geological column that we see now all happened in that moment. So they posit such that there was so much churn happening underneath that all of those layers happened, and they even were hydrologically sorted so that the heavier ones were at the bottom. That's why dinosaurs are at the bottom and the light animals are up top, because hydrological sorting, of course, and that's just a phrase they've invented. But so no, they didn't, like, there would have been no concept of needing to be buried, right? Because you were under Mount Error at least height of water. So that you just went to the bottom.
So the earth essentially buried the bodies by itself when the waters receded, something like that.
Well, and that yes, and that the earth underneath the water would have been churning enough that basically everything was, in that whole process, as the rain fell and the fountains of the deep burst open. Of course, because the Bible says that the water was jetting out both from above and below, right? The waters of the deep were pushing up, and the rain from below. So if you're going to accept those general premises, then you can imagine all kinds of scenarios where they're not so much worried about where the bodies were. Their problem is that they were buried in such a very specific order, in that the most primitive, evolutionary speaking, were buried at the bottom, and then there's no bunnies right below the dinosaurs. You'd think that if it was all just random churn, that at least one bunny would have made it under a T-Rex, but they didn't, as Bill Nye rightly pointed out. So that's more of the problem. But they do have, within their own worldview, they have an answer to that question. It's not something they haven't thought about.
I want to start an indie band and name it Bunnies Under Dinosaurs. So I'm just going to make that note right here.
Yeah.
Jim, anything else, my friend?
Oh, real quickly, because I don't want to hold you. I don't know how many callers you have, but something else I've been wondering is, creationists like to say that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. So, to me, the first question, the obvious question would be, well, then where are all the dinosaurs? What happened to them? And if I were a creationist, I would just say, oh, well, they all drowned in a flood. I understand some creationists insist that they were saved, that they were actually on the ark. And when they point out, I don't know how large these dinosaurs are, how could they say, oh, well, God conveniently slunk them down so that they would stand. So my question is, if dinosaurs and humans coexisted and they survived the flood, what happened? Why don't we see any dinosaurs today?
Jim,
right, so
I want to great. Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, let's maybe we can hang up on Jim and I'll just answer this briefly. But I don't want to make this a call of Paul giving answers in Genesis apologetics here. But the very brief answer is that they don't want to be able to say that God picked and chose certain species to die in the flood, right? They want to be able to say that God, because the Bible says every creature that had breath of life in their nostrils was to be saved. And so now that we know about dinosaurs, they would have to come up with a reason why they were excluded. That's more problematic than trying to say, hey, some got on, but humans are so good at hunting things that we just hunted them to extinction. But they genetically bottlenecked right down to those two individuals, like two sauropods and two T-Rexes, to everything, right? The humans basically got to them, and that's how, you guessed it, that's how we got the dragon's tails, and that's how we know that the knights were fighting dragons, is that some of those stories were real, and that they were fighting dinosaurs, and that humans just hunted them to extinction. So that is the short answer, although those are the same people that also say that humans can't affect the climate today. So I don't know how consistent their story is, but That's the answer to that.
I've heard variations, though, Paul. If you visit the Creation Museum, you see humans frolicking with dinosaurs, coexistence. They're just hanging out.
That's pre-flood, though. That's pre-flood.
Yeah. Well, I assumed it was all like, I assumed the dinosaurs never made it past. I assumed as a believer that whenever I saw the Ark Encounter, and Matt Dillahunty and I toured the Ark Encounter, which is a mind-numbing slog. You can hear the sound of they're literally brain cells walking to the edge of a platform and diving, just literally committing suicide. But he has like what looks like a puppy mill full of cages where they would put the baby dinosaurs, and he had larger cages for the raptors. And so he's saying that they survived and they all frolicked together. When I was a believer, we always thought that there were dinosaurs and they just never survived. And then the humans came after, or the flood wiped them all out. One of the conspiracy theories I'd heard was that God plants dinosaur bones in the earth to test our faith, even though there were no dinosaurs. You heard that one?
I have heard that one, though I suspect this is a little bit like eating the dogs and the cats. The person who started that channel, or at least the modern version of it, the person eventually did come out and say, yeah, they don't actually believe that. But absolutely,
they came forward and said they were just being a Poe, or what?
Yeah,
because I've heard it from more than one source.
But that's true. No, I'm now realizing that yes, it does. The idea that God put there to test our faith, that even predates me. So for sure, yeah.
I love Noah's Ark. By the way, there is room on the switchboard if you haven't called 21 times in the last year or whatever. There is room for you. We've got a few others. When someone asks me if I'm going to tackle the Bible, and this is on the larger macro stage, I don't do this with one-on-ones. I don't walk in with data points and try to refute face-to-face, at least at first. We get into identity beliefs and psychology of belief and why, the amygdala. And so walking in with data is not usually my first approach when I first engage someone eye to eye. But overall, when I'm on a larger stage, people are like, well, where do you start when you debunk the Bible? Do you start in Genesis with Adam and Eve? And I say, no. I start in Genesis, but I start with Noah's Ark, because Noah's Ark is a gift to counter-apologists. It's a gift, because every freaking part of the story just falls apart upon the most cursory analysis, right? I'm sorry, penguins walked 8,000 miles to board a stadium-sized boat in the middle of the desert built by a 500-year-old guy using only trees and tar? Really? When the animals were on the ark, what did they eat? What about the specialized diets? Herbs for the plant eaters and meat for the meat eaters, and the giant pandas only eat bamboo. How the hell are you going to figure that out? How did you eliminate thousands of pounds of animal waste out of a massive ship with only one window? All of this stuff. Why would he send the dove out to find land if he and God were on speaking terms only a few verses before, God being so specific that he gave him the actual blueprints, the qubits as to how to build, and then God goes mute and he says, no, you got to send a bird to go do recon, bring you back a twig, and that's how you know there's land. And since the ark doesn't have a sail, a motor, or a rudder, it couldn't be steered anyway. So even if land had been 50 feet next to them, they'd have just coasted right on by. They'd have been helpless. And what did they eat whenever they landed? Did no one else on the planet own a boat? How did 8 people commit incest to repopulate the planet, creating more than 5,000 ethnic groups in less than 4,000 years? I mean, one point after the other. Noah's Ark is a gift for the counter-apologist. That's my 2 cents. I don't know, where do you start when you start in the Bible, Paul?
Some of those things you hit on were literally my deconversion linchpin. Was when I went looking for the answer. Some of those things didn't make sense to me either. So I said, well, I'm a Christian. I'm going to find the best possible answers to these. So Ken Ham apparently had the best possible answers, and I read them, and I remember literally dropping the book on the floor when it got to that kangaroos just floated to Australia. That's how that happened. And I'm like, this is the best we got. And yeah, that was my whole domino. So you crystallized my thoughts eloquently on that.
Paul, I did not know this. You went to Kinham as an authority when you were a believer?
Yes, I absolutely did. I absolutely went thinking that this was going to get rid of the cognitive dissonance that was causing me problems when I was learning basic science facts. So yeah, no, I went to him absolutely thinking that I was gonna read the book and be able to, wash my hands, get back to youth ministry, and not worry about these scientific nigglings any longer. Didn't
Those
work out that way.
scientific nigglings. That's almost as good as bunnies under dinosaurs.
That's
Scientific nigglings.
I think nigglings would open for bunnies under dinosaurs.
So, sorry, I digress. I see a couple of calls here. I'm going to go there. We used to see any boat-shaped land formation, and we would in Turkey, and we'd be like, "Aha, aha! The Ark has been discovered." I remember somebody estimated that they found some wood that must have been old enough to have been part of the Ark, and they were excavated and. Maybe it was Hal Lindsey in the late great Planet Earth that was talking about this kind of thing. And of course, then you literally dig, and you find out that it's just dirt. It's just a mound of dirt that happens to be shaped like a boat. And we were scanning the horizon for proofs that, that validated us. What's that line? We weren't trying to be right. We wanted to be proven right. And so talk about confirmation bias. It's pretty remarkable that you escaped. Young Earth creationism. That's, I was a devout. I don't think I was a 6,000 yearer. So
I'm always the example people give, though, when people on my channel, they comment, no one can ever leave this. I'm like, where do you think I came from? I left it.
I've got a web call from Amir in the UK. Amir, you there?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can. Back off your phone just a little bit so it doesn't distort. What's on your mind?
Okay, is that any better?
Yes.
Much.
Cool. So I wanted to present an argument as to why I think God is the best explanation as to why anything at all exists. And in the first instance, I just wanted to clarify that I'm not arguing for a specific religious God, but rather a more generic kind of creator figure. And even though I feel that God is the best explanation, and even though there is some evidence for the existence of God, I'm going to concede, and I would say that the evidence is not compelling. However, from what we can derive, I still think it remains the best option. And first of all, I just wanted to ask you both a question. Are there any other options except for God that can explain why something at all exists? And if so, what makes them more compelling than the God hypothesis?
So, a couple of things. You're not here to interview us about what we believe. You're here to tell us what you believe and why. Also, I just wanted to go back to what you just said was the evidence isn't compelling, but it's the best explanation we have. Do you think police cases should be tried that way? The evidence isn't that compelling, but we don't have another suspect, so let's just go for it.
No, absolutely not.
So when the evidence isn't compelling, what do you do?
Well, when the evidence isn't compelling, you're not going to be able to make a judgment, but you can still speculate. Say, for example, the case with Madeleine McCann, no one could prove that the parents were guilty, but most people are of the opinion and can speculate, rightfully so, that the parents had some sort of involvement with the situation. And you see, with this conversation here, with this dialogue, I'm not trying to prove that God exists. I'm just trying to say that God is the best explanation as to why anything at all exists. And in fact, such a statement can be completely...
Why is it better than we don't know?
Well, it's not a comparison that you can make. It's not like you have options and we don't know. I'm happy to concede and say we don't know, but I'm just appending it with we don't know. However, from what we do know, God appears to be the best explanation.
All right. I'm done with my questions, Seth. You can go ahead now.
What would the nature of this God be? I mean, if you believed that there was a God, even a deistic watchmaker, first cause kind of God, that God in your mind must have certain attributes, what would they be and why?
I don't necessarily feel it's important to discuss these attributes of God. In order for us to say that God is the best explanation as to why anything exists, we're going to end up going on a tangent at that point.
No, it's not a tangent. Look, if you're going to say that there was an agent with a capital A who purposefully set things in motion, then I think you could probably infer certain things about the nature of that agent based on the creation that he, she, or it made, right? I mean, do you have any intuitions about that?
Intuitions, sure, we could say so. But again, I don't think we need an explanation of something if it appears to be the best explanation that there is. Otherwise, we'll end up in some sort of infinite regress and we won't make any progress from it. Let's just say, hypothetically, if we're all taking a stroll on a very distant planet and we come across some very sophisticated artifacts, then between us, we could all conclude that the best explanation for these artifacts happen to be extraterrestrials. Now, we don't need to know where these extraterrestrials have come from or what their motives were in order to conclude that the extraterrestrials are the best explanation for the artifacts. And it's the same thing here with God. We don't need to question the attributes of God or what God's motives were in order to say that God is the best explanation as to why anything at all exists.
No, I'm not done here, Paul. Hang on just a second. Because I don't want to walk on you, brother. I didn't know if you had something because I want to.
No, you're good. Keep going.
To come in. Okay, all right. Well, I disagree with your premise. I mean, you can say God's the best explanation. You've made a declaration, but you've given us no real reason to accept that it was a God. We'll call it a deity. Whether it's and to not even say that deity has certain characteristics or a proper name, we're not going to go that far. It has no attributes. We can't make any declarations or inferences about who or what it is. It just happens to be a God. I just disagree with your premise. And Paul's correct. The intellectually honest thing is to say, we don't know. I don't know. Paul doesn't know. You don't know. And even if it was some sort of a God thing out there, if I can borrow from Gene Roddenberry, how would that affect your life enough that you would want to call a show and talk about it? I mean, that God obviously is not a personal God, not involved in the everyday affairs of us, sits back and watch monumental failures of the plan that God supposedly put in place and does nothing about it. What would motivate you to call and defend a deity that isn't defending you?
Again, I think we're digressing slightly.
No, I'm asking a specific question. What motivates you to talk about the God with no name, who has no attributes, who must, or is most likely the genesis point for all of creation, all of the universe? What motivates that in you?
I'm sorry, can you just clarify? Are you asking me what motivated me to call the line today?
Are you a frequent caller to the show? I mean, I'm a relatively new host, so help me out.
No.
Okay. So you feel strongly enough about talking about this nebulous, faceless, who knows what it is, God, and you're using the word God, to call and say that you believe it is the most likely explanation. But that God, even if it existed, some sort of a thing that just spun the cosmos into existence, including the chaos that we see all around us and the cruelty that's happening 24/7, and all of the system failures which are built in, baked in to the universe that we live in, certainly the world that we live on. Why would you care enough to make your case when that God is not caring enough to involve himself, itself, whatever, in your life?
I care about these conversations because they're important, and I don't think we should dismiss God outright. I mean, at the end of the day, you're inviting Fierce onto the show to be able to at least have some sort of dialogue as to why certain people believe that God is the best explanation as to why anything at all exists. And I'm calling, therefore, to try to have this honest dialogue with you guys and hash it out a little bit.
That's fair. No, that's fair. But I'm interested that it matters, because essentially the answer that we all land on is we don't know. And you've admitted as much, Amir. You don't
Absolutely, we're in
know.
agreement. We are in agreement.
We don't
However,
know.
we can speculate. That is the thing. We can speculate. And this is where atheists, I don't think, make that leap of faith. They're just so set in their ways to say that we don't know. That's fine, but we can speculate nonetheless. And if you can agree that we can speculate, then we can make some sort of progress from here. Do you agree?
Wait, are you
That if
saying
it's fine
that
we can
people, that
speculate?
atheists don't speculate? We have conversations all the time about what an origin point may have looked like, and when did time begin, if ever? Is it a timeless universe? Space-time conversations that astrophysicists have on a daily basis, the multiverse theories that are being bounded about, often by atheists. So this idea that you're telling atheists that we're incurious, we don't care, we're not interested, we've simply closed our minds, I think is an unfair characterization of who we are. We're just saying intellectual honesty demands we say we don't know, which is the same thing you've said as well.
Sure, I didn't make that claim at all. I'm just saying that to say that I don't know.
No, you said we were rigid. You said we were rigid, and we weren't. Atheists were not speculating. And I disagree. I think we speculate, but we still don't know.
Okay, sure. Okay, that's fine. And so if we go from there, and if we agree that we can speculate, then we need to therefore ask the question, out of the options that exist, which option has the most intellectual persuasion? Is it God? Is it the multiverse? Is it some other naturalistic model? And then make some progress from there. And in my opinion, I think that God is the best explanation. And bear in mind, with the claim that I say that God is the best explanation as to why anything at all exists, that's actually a claim that an atheist can also make. Even though I do believe in God, the claim that God is the best explanation as to why anything at all exists can still be a claim that an atheist can make. They may not be persuaded that God exists, but they can still concede that God is the best explanation as to why anything at all exists. Do you both agree on that?
I just disagree.
I've never come
I
across
just
it.
don't. I don't think. I don't think God is the best explanation. I disagree with the premise of the claim that's being made. I don't know, Paul. Did you want to? I've been monopolizing. Do you have anything you want to add?
It's all right. So Amir,
I apologize. That's my dog around.
No, that's right. No worries. My puppy's here.
I
too,
do
so
believe in dog.
we're all good. So Amir, you're talking about a brute. God is a brute fact, right? Because you referenced you don't want infinite regress. So God is a brute fact in your system.
Correct.
And you would agree that all systems, philosophically, all systems just have a brute fact.
Correct. I believe that there is one. I was just going to say, yeah, I do agree that there's one aspect of reality that we would have to say is a brute fact, like, a necessary foundation, so to speak.
Right. So, and the definition of a brute fact is that something that has no further explanation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, you are positing God as a brute fact. Let's say, hypothetically, that I posit that matter and energy, probably energy, but they're interchangeable, is also a brute fact. Let's just say I'm positing energy is a brute fact. You're positing God is a brute fact.
Yeah.
Would you not? And you're familiar with Occam's razor, I presume.
Correct.
That you don't want to multiply entities beyond necessity.
Yep.
So in both of our systems, there's a brute fact. In both of our system, energy exists.
Sure.
So you are positing further entities further than my brute fact explanation, are you not?
Sure, but the reason why I have to posit let's call it a further entity, is because where you draw the line isn't sufficient. In order for time and matter to exist, it needs to exist within time. And so
no, it doesn't. No, Amir.
Of course,
many cosmologists, Christian ones, will tell you that space-time started at the Big Bang, but before that, if, as Seth already indicated, that before might not even be a coherent question, because time isn't part of what I'm positing as my brute fact.
So what are you positing exactly? That at the most fundamental level of reality, there was just matter and energy and no time.
Correct. And I'm joined in that by the preeminent cosmologists of our time.
So if there was matter and energy devoid of time, then how do we explain the existence of time? How could time come in?
Time is the fourth dimension of space-time. Time isn't a thing. Time is just like height and depth and width aren't a thing. Time is merely our fourth dimension.
Right. So you're saying that the underlying foundation of naturalism, that the natural world came into existence by a mechanism which itself is naturalistic. Am I right in thinking that?
So I think you are confusing our universe with all that exists. What would be the cosmos? People agree that our instantiation of space-time had a start point, but we have no tools to get further back than that. So I don't want to go into a large debate about this, but all I wanted to say was you are pausing a question in a way that I don't think you understand. You asked what the alternatives were, and I gave you just a taste of one, and it seems like it's new to you, and that is somewhat concerning. So if this is a question that is important to you and eats at you, I would just recommend that you look into Sean Carroll or look into any number of cosmologists out there, if you're laying things out on the table to choose between them. And Seth and I are arguing you don't need to choose because we don't have insufficient information, so don't choose. But if you feel like you have to,
I'm so sorry for the interjection because I'd rather hash out this point in particular and see if we can make progress on this. Look, my understanding is that Sean Carroll is an advocate of the many worlds hypothesis, correct?
Correct.
And that, okay, and so he's an advocate of the many worlds hypothesis. Now, in Sean Carroll's world of the many worlds hypothesis, it would imply that we are having this conversation an infinite number of times in an infinite number of, call it parallel universes, with an infinite number of variations. So in one particular realm of existence, we are having this conversation right now where we're all butt naked with, theatrical lights in the background and everything else, and you're wearing a wig, and we're saying that is more probable just because Sean Carroll and other.
I don't buy multiverse at all. Personally, don't buy it. Don't think that's how things happen. But Sean Carroll would agree that before our instantiation of space-time, matter and energy existed. And that would have to be the case for his theory to work. And that is they call it eternal. It's not timeless. It's not like forever, but they call it eternal.
Eternal.
So in that way, it's compatible, right? And so all I'm saying is, and we all have that, again, the Occam's razor. We don't have to multiply and say that there's a God that has to step in. So as neither Seth or I are cosmologists, I think we have probably soon reached the end of our rudimentary understanding of what we could represent. I just wanted to put on the table for you that I think Occam's razor makes all the naturalistic hypotheses more probable than your God one, because that's a huge entity to just insert. So, Seth, did you have anything to wrap up this with?
No, I'm interested. Amir, do you see that it's most likely a God just sort of kicked things off and then pissed off? Or do you see design? Do you see evidence for a God in the fine tuning? Do you go that far?
I'm not a fine tuning advocate as such. I think things like that can possibly be explained in some grander sort of science and evolution. I'm questioning it more from, call it the contingency argument,
Okay.
and the question of why anything at all.
It's interesting. We can speculate, and atheists will join you in speculating. I think we're hungry for answers. But right now we're just guessing because we don't know, and I think we all fall down on that side of the coin. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm still trying to fathom any scientific model that explains how the universe would have come into existence with just prior matter and energy in the absence of time, because things cannot come into existence in any capacity. And I'm trying to be very careful about the wording, which is why I'm
You're
slightly
still
pausing.
not.
We're
You're
going down the bunny hole again, man. It's been 20
Yeah.
minutes. I think we've covered it, but it's something we will continue to chew on in the comments section. But at the end of the day, I don't know remains the answer. That isn't the answer. Okay.
Yeah. So
right. Thanks
just
for
in all
calling.
of this, just like so I can clarify it as well.
All right. I'm going to move on. Sorry, Amir.
No.
I don't mean to be rude, but I said goodbye twice, and I just feel
Mhm.
like we were on the hamster wheel. Did you get that vibe? You know,
I
I don't
absolutely
know,
did,
you
and
don't know. So
I felt like the whole idea that he's convinced that what people think is that something came from nothing, which is something I had to learn that isn't really what cosmologists posit at all, until you get over that hurdle. And I don't think he was there yet. He needs to just get over the hurdle that that's not what he's arguing against. So,
well, and one of
anyway,
the reasons I ask about fine tuning and intelligent design, granted, this has been on my mind recently as I narrated a book about it from Dr. Abby Hafer. But you know, I have all these people who were like, "Look at the trees, people." I think Eve was framed was on my show last week, and she was like, you know, one of the arguments that drove her the most crazy, and this isn't the argument Amir was making, but it popped into my mind, was, you know, look at how amazingly fine-tuned it. Look at how intricate and complex. If we were this much closer to the sun, we'd bake. And if we were this much further away, we would freeze. Obviously, we were hand-placed here. And I'm always like, well, you know, our sun gives off dangerous UV rays that gives us cancer. So our main source of light kills us, or at least harms us. And explain the design, which includes genetic defects and mass extinction events and child cancer and macular degeneration and blind creatures that have eyes and deaf creatures with ears and you know, volcanoes that kill 10,000 people, a tsunami that kills 250,000 human beings in one day. Don't tell me the planet is fine-tuned for us. Don't tell me this universe was made for us in mind. And so I always get a little bit of a whiff of divine destiny, not with Amir, but almost always then when someone talks about, you know, it came from someone, somewhere. I always feel like we're supposedly an end result that was always in mind. And so that's why I asked the question. The fine tuning argument, I honestly, at first blush, it just falls apart. We are obviously not, you know, the end goal of a grand designer. And if we were the designer, I want to talk to the manager because I have many complaints. Are you good to take another call, Paul? How you doing for
let's
time?
go. I'm good.
I have Stephanie out of Texas. Hi, Stephanie, you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh my goodness,
can.
Texas. I'm your neighbor to the north, and I think you and I have some of the same challenges. Aren't they trying to put Moses in public school classroom textbooks down there, and they have been for the last 15 years and stuff like that? So
Yeah.
my heart goes out to you, Stephanie. My heart goes out to
Hey,
you. Thanks for calling.
can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we
can.
Okay. Yeah, hey, first time caller, long time listener, not really, but because this is the first time I have actually found the line, this thing. But yeah, and Seth, you and I met just last time you were in Fort Worth. Maybe 2 months ago at the end of July, I believe, or something.
Yes.
Yeah, well, anyway. Yeah, I was calling because I was like kind of wondering about y'all's ideas or thoughts on like how would how y'all about the political landscape of like right now. Like how do you think it's gonna play out, or
how do I think it's going to play out?
well, I mean, not. I don't know. I'm just kind of.
I'm tracking. Look, no. I'm tracking, Stephanie. I'm tracking. Paul, you want to talk about it? You've got a vantage from up north. You have any thoughts on this?
I guess
you want me to take?
I mean, we've discussed this prior, that it's shocking to me that it is close. So I think that how it's going to go is going to largely depend on turnout, and it's going to be who can energize their base to turn out. I think Kamala has obviously is been much better at that than Joe was at energizing people. So that's really going to come down to that. So I mean, I try and encourage my American friends, any who are discouraged, is to take that nervous energy and enlist people to make sure that they vote. And because ultimately it's going to be tough for you. You're not in one of the swing states necessarily. Although, wouldn't it be great if you were? That would be awesome. But you're not in one of the swing states. So if you know anyone in Pennsylvania, if you know anyone in Arizona, like, make sure you're on them about getting out to vote. So I think it's too close to call personally, even though I like where the trend is going. You weren't even asking. I shouldn't presume what your politics are, Stephanie. I just think it's too close to call, and therefore, if you're in a swing state, do what you got to do to get people to the polls.
Stephanie,
and I think it's ridiculous that there. I think it's ridiculous that there's swing states at all. That's right. That was just the last thing I wanted to say. Because from the outside perspective, that's bizarre. But carry on.
Right. And I kind of wanted to touch on this, not discussion. It was, we'll just call it a discussion for right now, that I had with my father, who is also an atheist. And he was he was planning on coming to seeing you, Seth, because he lives in Fort Worth, when you were here, but he's 85 and a bit disabled, and so he was decided not to come. At any rate, we were having a discussion of, I said, I just do not understand. Please help me understand why someone would actually back this man that is running, I just do not understand. And, my father is an atheist, but he's a diehard Republican. And I am the black sheep, I guess you would call it, with my family. It's like all my family, my mother's side and my father's side, are diehard Republicans. And I'm the only one with any sense. But it just makes no sense to me how someone cannot see him for what he is, and just especially because you're an atheist, and so I was just really confused about that, and it's been going in my head for I think we had this conversation last week, and it's just been replaying in my head, and so I just wanted to get it off my chest, I guess.
Well, I think you speak to one of the many questions that we've been asking ourselves here throughout the United States. I myself must have been so monumentally naive to think we would ever get here. I thought, well, with the rise of the non-religious, the rise of the seculars, We're seeing the sea change. The zeitgeist is evolving. I had underestimated the power players, which essentially started in the mid 20th centuries, but really got underway in the 1980s with the moral majority. And then came the Heritage Foundation, the Family Research
Yeah,
Council, all of the people who were wired in with the billionaires who well funded these strategic moves to essentially hijack everything from school boards to the Supreme Court. And they have been successful. I never suspected, never thought they would repeal Roe. I thought that was settled law. And I look around and I think, wow, how did we get here? And I think the thing that strikes me is that it's the celebration of cruelty. If you watch
right,
many of the speeches, which are, I don't think it's hyperbole to say they are reminiscent of 1930s Germany, they are
right.
vilifying the other. They are coming to poison the blood of our country. They're going to steal and eat your animals. They are the rapists coming over the border. They're the Hannibal Lecters. Well, this is straight up dehumanization, and there is a purpose. What you do is you target an easily scared demographic and you frighten them. It's the Fox News model. You lock them into an information silo. This is also what cults do. You lock them into an information silo, you put an authority in place and you say, trust us, trust no one else. We're giving you the facts, they're giving you fake news. And then you say that everybody's coming to take everything that's precious to you. They're going to come and take your freedom and steal your votes and make your Bible illegal and shut down your church and make your kids trans and steal your job and give it to an illegal immigrant. And everything's going to become satanic. And you get the people riled up, it becomes a holy war, and then they're really dangerous. So here in the United States, we have more guns than citizens in this country. We have
That
400
is what
million
I'm
firearms.
afraid of.
And I'm a gun owner. I've got
That
a
is,
couple of pistols. I have a couple of pistols I use for target shooting. They're not part of my identity. I would surrender them if there was a national recall. I don't, it's not like some of these guys where they have equated their firearm with their own notions of national identity and American freedom. I'm not that guy. I'm fully trained and responsible and licensed. Those people do exist, but I will tell you, there's an entire culture of people who have been frothing and waiting for an attack of Satan against everything they are and everything they want and everything they will do or can't do. And they are going to then declare a civil or holy war against the rest of us. I'm terrified. Forgive me for my rant,
yeah,
Stephanie, but you wanted to speak to that?
that is exactly how I feel. And yes, I do get nervous and about like what is going on, And
Yeah.
I blame Ronald Reagan and his extreme views, not extreme, but his backing from the Heritage Foundation. And that reminds me, a caller like before Amir or before, I don't know, a couple of callers ago, he was talking about the heritage or the Bible and Noah's Ark and putting dinosaurs around because I was told Satan put dinosaurs in the ground to screw with our heads, But that was in 1991. I was just coming out of class. I was in high school, and I was just coming out of class, and someone stopped me in the hallway and was talking about intelligent design. And that must have been like right as not too long after the Heritage Foundation came through. And because, the time frame kind of gives the same. Do you know what I mean? I mean, this is why I can't debate anyone, because my mind goes He says like all these different things at the same
It's like
time.
a lightning strike. You take every streamer that comes along because they're all relevant and they all feel important. But I
Right.
feel you, Stephanie. I really do, and I share your concerns. But I think let's keep kicking and let's continue to try to promote humanist values and whatever platforms and candidates most fit those. Right now, the perfect is the enemy of the good, and so be diligent. And thanks for spreading some rationality down there in Texas, America. Okay.
Hey, I'm trying, man.
All right.
So when are you
I'm
coming
going to move
back
on, my
to
friend.
Texas?
I'll
When are you
be
coming
back to
back
Texas probably next year. I do a speaking tour and usually hit either Dallas or Fort Worth, and then Austin, San Antonio, Houston. Usually do it in a weekend, and so I hope to be back. I'm doing, I think, a speech next year called Seth Andrews Teaches Sunday School. I'm going to find all the weird
Oh,
shit
cool.
that we never heard on Sunday mornings. I'm going to turn that into a speech with some pretty awesome slides, and I'm going to try to bring that on the road next year. Okay.
Fun. I'm gonna travel around like a little groupie.
Oh, well, just come as
Not really.
we'll call you
I'm
family,
just,
not a groupie. Okay.
I'm just
We're
kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm not that psycho.
all right, my friend.
Anyway,
Be
thanks
safe.
for
I'm going to move
taking my
on.
call.
All right, we'll see you later. I'm
Take
kind
it.
of a momentum guy, so I'm trying to find those pauses and the
Mhm.
exit point. Let's talk about that just a little bit, Paul. I am surrounded by evangelicals who are almost cult-ish, and I look at, they're out banging the Bible all the time, you know, biblical values, Christian values, Jesus, 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 Jesus. And I think to myself, okay, well, Jesus was often a problematic character, and we're not talking about this quite
Mhm.
a lot in the church. But if you read the New Testament, Jesus was sometimes a shitty character. Um, but let's say it's the best version of Christ, right? The ideal version of Jesus. Show me one thing about Donald Trump that would be Christ-like. And I'm just like, humility? No. Charity? No, he stole from charity. Um, don't love money? Are you shitting me? The guy's got a golden toilet. He talks all the time about how much of a hoarder he is. Don't bear false witness or lie. I mean, how he told what 300 lies during the debate. Don't covet, be humble, don't take vengeance. He actually tells people when someone wrongs you to go out and get even. He's a bully. Our parents taught us, don't be a bully. You're on the schoolyard and you see somebody who's being bullied, be their advocate. Go and be strong for them. Be their protector. That's what Jesus would do. And instead, I'm surrounded by evangelicals who take the guy who is the antithesis of the best version of Jesus, and they fucking love the guy. I can't figure it out, Paul. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think those who think about it will acknowledge the character flaws. I'm dumbfounded by the ones that are just embracing and are seemingly oblivious to the notion that Jesus was about the leader should put themselves second. When you listen to a Trump speech, all you hear is what the presidency will do for him, not what the
Yeah.
presidency will do for the citizens. So that's obviously the opposite of the first shall be last and the last shall be first. But I think that the evangelicals I know, they hold their nose and they say, but abortion. And that is, that's that single issue thing that no matter how even I know some pastors who are even saying, hey, even if you disagree with foreign policy or economic policy of the Republicans, it's your moral duty. That one blanket covers all. So until that comes codified into law, although who knows, maybe it needs to be enshrined in an actual amendment to the Constitution before this will finally be put to bed, where that single issue will overweigh and trump, as it were, any any other considerations. That's
The
tough. It's a
pastor's
tough
on
one.
stage, and he's like, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." And then he goes out and he's got a Trump sticker on his car. I just don't get it.
No.
Oh, I mean, I do, and you speak to the single issue aspect. I do have a lot of people who that for them is the most important, in fact, maybe the only thing, because they have this vision in their mind of those evil libs going in the 8th month and 29th day, and they're twirling their even the women are twirling their mustaches
Right.
as they rip the baby out of the womb, and then they laugh to themselves, and then they drink the blood of the child to harvest adrenochrome for a fountain of youth. Then they all go and have a party at Comet Pizza in Washington, D.C. I mean, they have all these wacky conspiracy theories, not knowing, I mean, reproductive education, at least in the Bible Belt, is a joke. I knew I opposed abortion when I was a believer. I had no idea how fertilization worked. I didn't know that roughly half of all fertilized embryos fail, which would make God the most prolific abortion doctor in history. I didn't understand, certainly couldn't empathize with the struggles of people who had been impregnated or were going through rape trauma or abuse or, all of these other factors that were going on. All I knew is I had an opinion about it, which is, pretty common in the faith. I didn't know what evolution was, but I sure had an opinion on it. I didn't know about this, or they didn't know about the founders, but I sure had an opinion on it. And so I'm struck, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of trying to promote actual science-based education. So I think if people understood what these things really were, if they understood their history, if they understood, they took real classes on the social studies, they would better understand the world they live in and would make more informed and better decisions. I'm babbling. Sorry about that, Paul. I've got some other calls. You want me to jump in here and see what sticks?
Let's do it.
Matthew, you've been on hold for 1 hour and 39 minutes. Let's talk. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Paul, Seth. Yeah, Paul invited me back from my last call and said when he's on, he wanted to talk to me about how Peter and Paul did not write the letters attributed to them. So I wanted to honor that and listen to what he had to say.
So are you wanting me to just straight up make a case that they didn't? Because that takes whole hours. Or are you calling to defend that they did write them? Or are you wanting to hear
I just wanted to hear what you had.
Okay, then I will keep it. Then I'll try and keep it as brief as possible because I have videos. I was literally attending a whole conference, 10-hour conference this weekend with Bart Ehrman on a lot of these topics, where they were literally. So, for example, the letters of Paul. We talked about.
I didn't want to spoil it for myself. I didn't want to come in with a bias.
Yeah. Okay. So, very briefly, there's 13 letters of Paul. There's 13 letters in the New Testament that claim to be written by Paul. Hebrews is that weird one where at some point in history, some people thought it was, but it doesn't claim to be. So we'll leave that aside. Scholars basically put forth that probably 7 of those are the ones you get most agreement from almost all scholars in this topic, that there's the undisputed letters of Paul, and then the other 6 are likely not. The arguments for that fall into and they're very lengthy. Again, entire volumes on each of these. There's stylistic differences, which is very convincing if you read Greek. For people like Seth and myself who do not read, I don't think Seth reads Greek. I don't. You have to take their word for it. Okay, the style is different, much in the way that if you picked up J.R.R. Tolkien and George R.R. Martin and the Harry Potter books, they're all fantasy books, but because we speak English, we definitely see, these were written by different people. So there's a whole category of arguments there. Some people are convinced, some are not. There's categories of arguments around literary dependence, where clearly the letters that we think are definitely written by Paul, they're all sort of free form and, written like a guy who might be in prison and doesn't have access to study things. Whereas the other 6 letters copy and paste from the initial letters the way a forger would do. So that's one line of argumentation. Then there's a whole line of argumentation where forged letters copy other forged letters. 2 Thessalonians is virtually the same letter as 1 Thessalonians, except for a chapter about the Antichrist in chapter 2. So anyway, these are all letters where people kind of say, you know what? 6 of these letters of Paul, they sure don't seem the same. And they also, they also have anachronisms, right? Where they are using words like presbyters and other advanced topics that were the later 3rd century church had, 2nd, 3rd century church had, but Paul definitely dying before, they even took over Jerusalem, wouldn't have known about. So those are categories of arguments. And then when it comes to Peter, the categories of arguments kind of go into, in Acts 4, Peter is literally declared by the crowd to be an unschooled ordinary man. And the Greek word there, unschooled, literally means unlettered, as in he doesn't know how to write. So then you have to at least posit, he was using secretary, something like that. Most scholars believe that the style of 1st and 2nd Peter are so different they can't be the same person. So at least one is forged. But they also contain anachronisms and various things that are, I'm going to try and wrap this up super quick. They, things Peter wouldn't have known about in the letters, and probably the most egregious of all, that he's quoting Paul. And all we know from Paul's authentic writings is that he and Peter did not get along. They didn't agree. They just, everything that Paul ever wrote, he didn't like the guy. So that they'd be so copacetic in the letters of Peter doesn't sound very plausible at all. I don't know how quick that was. That is like the super fast speed run case against the authorship of those two things. Do you have any questions about that?
Not any questions. I just thought you had something like, I mean, I guess like you said, you don't have it all the time, I guess. I was expecting like something more concrete or something that you had that.
Well, you can go to my channel. I have hour-long video.
Yeah.
I have hour-long videos on each of these topics if you want to go like.
Yeah. Like I said, I just didn't want to come spoiled with like a pre-answer to that. I kind of wanted to see what you had.
Okay. Now I understand that a lot of Christians don't find those things compelling. Scholars absolutely do. My belief or disbelief in Christianity has nothing to do with which letters Paul wrote. Most of the letters that Paul probably didn't write are the ones where he's shitty to women. So whatever. It'd be great for society if Christians would give it up, because they're some of the worst ones. And I'd also, the case against the resurrection Peter could have wrote every single word of 1st and 2nd Peter. Doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter to my case against Christianity. But these are just scholarly curiosities that I'm kind of a fan of. The more potent thing, the more pertinent thing is who wrote the Gospels, right? Because the Gospels are actually the story of Jesus. The epistles, people treat them as they want to treat them. A lot of pastors ignore them. A lot of pastors who want to do terrible things lean on them heavy. That's just an unfortunate side effect, not the root cause.
So you basically you come to this information like as a fan, not as somebody who has like a concrete stance on it. You're more just like, oh, this is interesting. I thought maybe it was a little bit more something that you knew. Or
no, I've come to agree. I've come to agree with scholars that it's laughable. For the Peter, the 1st and 2nd Peter, like, is just near universal that Peter did not write 1st and 2nd Peter. But I'm just saying there's nothing of weight. You could erase 1st and 2nd Peter from the Bible, and Christianity is largely unaffected. So whatever.
Even this is just my contention or response. I don't want to get too much into it, but even 2 Peter 5-11, if you could erase that, and Christianity would be nothing or the same.
Well, why? Remind me what doctrine is in that section.
Basically, adding on to your faith, virtue, knowledge, brotherly kindness, godliness, charity.
Yeah,
if you do these things, if you don't
love your neighbor as yourself, would still exist, right? Like, no, but Jesus love, like, that's all love your neighbor as yourself stuff. That's just empathy.
Well, verse 9 says if you don't do these things, basically you're not making it to heaven.
Yeah, and Jesus said that too, right? That's what I'm saying. There's not 1st and 2nd Peter, as I remember them, and at one point I had them memorized, and I competed for them, and I won my Bible Skip tuition by quoting these verses. But you'll forgive me if they've, in the decades of past, they've faded. There's nothing there's no weight. Like there's no single point of anything in First and Second Peter that
Even
is a problem.
and forgive me, I may because I'm a Christian and I obviously love this stuff. 1 Peter 4:1 and 2, nothing.
How is that a pillar upon which Christianity sits?
Well, it says that that Christ suffered for us, so likewise in the same mind we suffer in the flesh, so that we no longer sin, so that we live the rest of the life in the flesh, not to the lust of man, but to the will of God.
Yes, this is nice. This is nice poetry, but that's not doctrine, right? Like that's not unique doctrine. That is only 100% that passage.
Doctrine.
No, but it's not doctrine exclusive to that passage. That's what I'm saying. You could take it out.
Yeah, okay.
You could lift it. You could lift it out, and Christianity completely survives, right? Like every doctrine exists, and that's why I'm saying these are curiosities.
And you may be right, but when I present 1 Peter 4:1 and 2 to professing Christians, like people who say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Christian," it's like they almost like cringe at that verse. They don't want it in there because it destroys the whole evangelical Protestant idea of we're always sinners and no one's perfect and all this stuff. It literally obliterates that idea. I think 1 Peter 4:1 and 2 is very powerful.
Jesus said, "There's no one righteous, no, not one." I mean, so again, these are. I mean, it may well
when did he say
color.
That?
It's a verse. I can't remember. There was no one word. Why do
you call me good? It's like the rabbi. Like what must I do to be good? Or what? It's roughly there.
Then he told them to be perfect. Give up your possessions and follow me, and then you'll have treasure in heaven. That's how you become perfect.
That's what he's. But I'm just saying the idea that no one is perfect is already existing. Look, now we're in the weeds about some of this stuff.
Okay.
Not.
All right.
No. Now we're
I just thought you had something more concrete.
I just pulled it up out of Romans chapter 3, verse 10. As it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. I mean, the entire atonement story.
Yeah, that wasn't Jesus. That was Paul, but I hear you. Or maybe
Christ
not Paul.
Himself.
Paul.
Hey, I want you to allow us to finish a sentence, Matthew. The entire atonement scenario is based on the fact that we are all sinners worthy of damnation or at least annihilation and have to be atoned for rescue to achieve heaven. The entire atonement on the cross scenario hinges on our unworthiness. So to tell me that Jesus never said it, Jesus was it. The entire Jesus story is an atonement story based on our unworthiness. And whether or not it says so in 1 Peter or in any of the Gospels is really beside the point.
Sorry, I meant that the idea that we can't be perfect is completely obliterated by 1 Peter 4:1 and 2. When the Christians say, "Oh, we're always going to sin and we're always going to sin, no one's perfect," I'm saying 1 Peter 4:1 and 2 obliterates that idea.
So let me ask you this:
you and I are talking about two different things. Yes. You're talking about perfection. I'm talking about unworthiness.
I understand. That's why I made it clear. That's why I made a clarification. But Paul, you were going to say something?
All I was going to say was, you would agree, I think that Christianity hinges entirely on resurrection, right? If Jesus rose from the dead, Christianity is true no matter how flawed the New Testament is?
Yeah. If Jesus Christ didn't rise from the dead, then what's the point?
Right. So this is why when I am now in the big picture, right? I'm outside. I'm an outsider test. I don't care about the internal little minor squabbles that you're talking about there, about the nuances between the way Seth described it, which is how I understand it, and the way you described it. Don't care. I care about, did Jesus rise from the dead or not? Nothing in 1st and 2nd Peter at all impacts whether Jesus rose from the dead or not. Similarly, in the 6 letters that are definitely forgeries, in my opinion, definitely forgeries, not written by Paul. None of those impact whether Jesus rose from the dead or not. So when I, as an outsider, am talking about, can you lift these books out or not, I'm still looking for that. Is Christianity true? And there are Christians who will admit that the New Testament has flaws. There's Christians that will die on a hill that there's not a single flaw in those books.
Yeah.
But that's not where Seth or I are at. So,
yeah, and you have to forgive me. Like I said, it may be that my love for these letters that we were given. Even Peter talks about being an eyewitness to this resurrection. So I would think that would be important.
I'm going to move
Peter,
on.
but
thanks for calling. Appreciate it very
yep.
much. All right. I mean, he goes right back
Also-
to Peter says, and the entire point was we don't know that Peter said, and then he says, well,
Yeah.
it's I may be. Did he use the word biased? Because I've fallen in love with these books. That's problematic. When we fall in love with ideas, and this gets us back to identity beliefs, they become branded or grafted onto who we are. And this is one of the reasons it's very challenging to talk to anyone who has an identity belief. And it can be Christianity, it can be Islam, it can be flat earth, all right? It can be an anti-vaxxer, which is maybe branded onto their notions of being free, or a contrarian, or they're not a sheeple, or any of these types of things. If you go and you say, well, I fell in love with this idea, then you aren't looking to be right. You are looking to be proven right. You're going to find evidence to make you sound or look right. And so for him to say, well, I've really fallen in love with these things, and then to continue to go back to the letter as if being written in that way makes it true is problematic. It's interesting that David Fitzgerald, historical research, he has just released a 3-part book series that I want your take on. I'm not going to, you probably haven't read the books. But his take is that not only does he think there was no Jesus, that he was a mythical character, and I don't know. I mean, it could have been a guy that the myth was based on, or it could have been, he could have been based on previous deities. I don't know, whatever. But he submits that Paul may not have even existed either. In Volume 2, Who's Real and Who's Not in the Bible, Find Out in God's Imaginary Friends, Judaism and Christianity, when we take a deep dive into the Bible's mix of myth, folklore, and political propaganda. And he gets into Abraham, Moses, Samson, David, Solomon, Jesus, John the Baptist, Paul, and others. Do you think Paul was a real guy? Paulogia?
So I only recently learned that Paul mythicism was a serious thing. So, but I absolutely do. And this is my pragmatic take. A single individual wrote 7 of those. Just, it seems from all external things that we can tell about common authorship, a single person wrote 7 of those letters that made it into the New Testament. I understand there's some scholars on the fringe that don't think that, but that's fine. Pragmatically, what are we going to call that? The person who signed those letters all said, I, Paul, write this letter with my own hand, right? So I'm pragmatically going to say, what sense does it make that there was a single author of those letters calling himself Paul who wasn't Paul? If someone wanted to do that, okay, I guess. But it just seems pragmatically there's a single... Again, just like you and I might agree, hey, was there a Jewish man named Jesus who was crucified? Oh, and that's what, and that's the extent of what we can know about him? Maybe. Okay. Sure. There, as far as I can tell, there was a person who wrote 7 letters, and I'm calling that person Paul. So that's
I love
where I'm at on that one.
Christ was resurrected story. When the apologists say, well, of course he was resurrected. I've seen debates. I think Ehrman may have done a debate called "What Do You Believe in the Resurrection?" Somebody did. One of the scholars, counter apologists, whatever. Is it reasonable to believe in the resurrection? And I think one part of the story that always blows my mind is, when Jesus was crucified, the graves of the saints opened up, right? And then when he was resurrected, the saints crawled out of the graves and they paraded through the city of Jerusalem. And not one contemporary historian thought that was news. Like, nobody thought, holy shit, there's a whole ton of there's zombies shambling through. All the dead people that we haven't seen they're just walking through. And nobody thought that was worth putting in a history book. I find that fascinating.
Exactly, yeah.
Tonight, at real fast on the schedule, I'm going to do my due diligence on the Late Show. It is going to be Matt Dillahunty and Forrest Valkai. Oh, yes, there shall be scientific niggling on the broadcast on the line tonight. Tomorrow night, Skeptalk, it's John Gleason. And are you back for that tomorrow? I've got you on the list, Paul.
I apparently am, yes.
Double duty. The man, we
Double-
can't get enough of Paulogia.
Back to back.
Coming up Tuesday night, 6 o'clock Central, it's Eve Was Framed and Alyssa Ljub on Chewed Gum. There will be no hang up on Wednesday night. I don't know why. Arden told me and I've already forgotten. And then Thursday night, it's the Transatlantic Call-In show. That's going to be with Josie Caballero, Luxander, and Arden Hart. Much to do on the schedule this week. And it's always fun to have so much content for people to choose from. Going back to the lines, forgive me, Paul, I heard you begin to speak. Go ahead.
All I was going to say was it's my understanding that there will be a show on the line on Wednesday. It just won't be. We just don't know what it will be yet. It won't be
okay.
the hang up. So tune in on Wednesday for something.
Okay. I'll only watch if there's scientific niggling. Let's see. Cloud. I hope I have this correct. North Carolina. Am I saying it right? Cloud?
Yeah.
Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
So my call is basically I guess I have to give a little bit of just background. I recently ended a relationship with someone that I enjoyed being in a relationship with, but she was just super religious. And I had a similar kind of problem when it comes to like thinking, is it worth it to try to have someone who's like deeply entrenched in religion, like their entire life revolves around it? If they were to get disconnected from it, they're essentially disconnected from like all their friends, all their family, and essentially like their life. And so I had a similar problem when it comes to like my mother. I finally gave up on trying to, I guess, convince her out of her deep indoctrination. And it's just, I can't figure out whether or not it's a good thing of, if someone is so deep into their faith, is it worth it to try, especially when it's like a very problematic faith, is it worth it to try to convince them out of it because you think this person would be capable of doing it? So let's say if they did do it, they would then be cut off from like their life. Is it worth it to just let them continue to live that life so that they're not essentially having to restart?
Paul, I'll hand it off to you, brother.
No, I said most of the words last time, please.
I remember when I came out of the faith, I thought, wow, the people in my circle need to know what I've discovered. I walked in with all the list of contradictions and the atrocity, and oh, look, there's slavery and child sacrifice and genocide and 500,000 people killed in one of God's crusades. And oh, look at the history that disproves these claims and that claim. This prophecy didn't come true, and this makes no moral sense, and hell's bullshit, and blah, blah, blah. I remember walking into those rooms thinking, wow, once they see what I have seen, they will be liberated from their chains, and we will all live happily ever after. And I was so naive, and it was frustrating. Have you engaged at all with your mom? Have you tried to have a conversation already?
Yeah, we had a 4-hour-long conversation. At the end of it, she literally said, "There's nothing you can show me that will change my mind." And I was like, okay. And I decided to just take her at her word.
Let me guess. You came with data, right? Because you may know the Bible better than she does. And then she responded. Things got heated, or emotional voices were raised, and everybody started talking over each other until finally there was a shutdown. Is that how it went?
Honestly, there was no yelling or anything like that. It's just that I would show her, like, say, one thing we got into an argument about was saying that she didn't believe that God changed Pharaoh's or hardened Pharaoh's heart. So I had to go through that, show her in the Bible, like, okay, God violated his free will here. And so then after that, she was like, I still don't believe that's what God did. She thinks that God the way she described it is like God suggested that Pharaoh couldn't free the slaves. I still don't really understand what her point was with that there. But it wasn't like we weren't yelling or anything like that. But I would present a point, say something, show her that, hey, it's either in the Bible, or show her that, especially when she's the younger creationist, she doesn't believe in evolution or anything like that. She doesn't believe humans are animals. Show her, okay, there's a bunch of stuff like, hey, we have cell walls, stuff like that. And she just wouldn't believe it. Like, she wouldn't accept it. I couldn't show her anything that would be like, oh, okay, this happened, or anything like that.
4 hours. Normally in these conversations, I always start shallow. You're not going to build Rome in a day. I always like to go in and make the first encounters relatively brief. If I can use a religious term, seed planting. I remember talking to someone, a woman who was a devout God defender, and I said, you're actually forbidden in the New Testament from instructing me, right? I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man. And showed her chapter and verse right there in black and white. And she said, my God would never silence women. So what does that tell me? It tells me that the facts don't matter, right? She's fallen in love with an idea of what her faith is. It is part of her identity. It's probably a big part of her community. It is who she is, what she thinks, the music she listens to, the clothes or jewelry that she wears, the activities, her friends, her identity. And if those dominoes start to fall, man, the implications are pretty hardcore. I don't think it's your responsibility to fix her. I think, that is something, it's like an alcoholic. You're not going to be able to make someone stop drinking. I think you can express concern. You can say, I disagree, and here's why. I think adult conversations are necessary. I think challenge is critical. And she should know who you are and why. But if she admits outright, I don't care what you say, I will never change my mind, you have to ask yourself, well, how much of my own time, energy, oxygen, patience, sanity am I going to invest in someone who's already told me outright they are an immovable brick wall? Paul, would you bother to
That's why I
engage
gave up
someone
on
who
like
admitted outright that she said she's never going to budge? Would you bother?
Family, I just family in general is a tricky one, and I don't think that families convert or deconvert other family members at a high success rate on either side of the fence. So sometimes family is just better to maintain the relationship and demonstrate that there are atheists in the world that are not baby eaters, kind of situation. But the general broader question for me, rightly or wrongly, and maybe I'm flawed in this, I kind of evaluate how much harm, and in my view, I understand I'm not the arbiter of who's doing harm. But for example, my own grandparents, who I knew didn't have much time left when I deconverted, they were not actively teaching Sunday school class. They were not actively evangelizing anyone. So and they the amount of harm they were doing with what I thought were flawed ideas, and they're fundamentally decent people to strangers. In that case, and they didn't have a lot of years left, it was like, well, I think I'm going to leave well enough alone there. But a generation lower, people who are still actively evangelizing, people who are still actively voting, people who are still actively potentially letting these bad ideas do harm. Yeah, I think that there is value in that. But as Seth said, it's not everyone's job to deconvert every single other person. And so I think that family thing overrides, in that I think your responsibility within your family is not to get their ideas right. And maybe my view of family is different than what other people's, but I feel like the family unit is you protect and you maintain those relationships, and you do call them out when they're doing specific harm, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it's your responsibility to change those ideas. I do think it's worth it when there's a bit of harm there, but I've made some judgment call with some seniors that I didn't think it was going to be worth it for them. Maybe that makes me a bad atheist or a bad anti-theist or something. I'm not sure. That's just a personal line, and I don't know if that's helpful, Cloud.
Okay, that's what I said. With her, I finally realized that it's better just to give up on it. It is what it is. But I was just thinking, like, in a broader sense, if you meet someone else who isn't like that, that's why I brought up, like, my ex. The similar thing where I realized that I couldn't continue the relationship, but also I realized that she, like, you ever meet someone who are really deep into our religion, but, like, they're questioning, well, I shouldn't say if you ever met someone, you guys have been those people. But you think if you push them, maybe you could help them get out of it because they're showing signs that they want to. But also, if they do that, they would essentially have, like, nothing. So, like, I feel like
No.
I guess to me it feels wrong to do that.
No, let me jump in. Well, first of all,
sure.
I'm not sure I like the word push, but I take the spirit of what you're saying. I think people change their minds in an environment where they feel safe. I feel like if you were in her zip code and you sense that she was questioning, there's a way, there's a path forward where you're not pushing, right? You're not trying getting her back on her heels where all of a sudden she may start to, tighten up and get defensive, but instead you start asking questions or you talk about your own journey. I remember I was going through this and I had some questions and I was dissatisfied with what, and so I'd be curious, do me a favor and take a look at this and tell me what you think, right? The idea isn't to convince her as to what you think. The idea is to get a how to think process going on where she can own the journey because she's taking it on her terms. I think one of the best things we can do as secular people, as non-religious people, is not to walk in a room with a fuck God t-shirt on and immediately start telling everybody why the Bible is crap. All right? The Bible's crap. We know it's fake. We know it's fiction. We know it's myth. We know much of it's borrowed, tons of it's immoral. We already know that. We're not going to get traction walking in that way. I think if you walk in and you are an attractive human being who loves people and has a moral center and has a good sense of humor and is all about connecting and trying to find shared values and all of those things, that begins to change people's perception. Then they find out you're a non-believer and all the shit they heard on Fox News about them evil, godless people who were coming to ruin the party. It just doesn't work. They tilt. Now you've messed up their categories and they have to open their mind to make room for you. And once they do that, then you're sharing the same space as human beings with shared humanity. And it's in that safe environment where conversations can begin. So my point is, be you. Right? If you are living a loud, proud, secular life, people know you're an atheist, but you don't wear it on your sleeve and throw it at people like you'd throw a brick. You're not ashamed of it. You are who you are. You're going to live your life on your terms and everybody sees it. I think that's maybe one of the best weapons we have in this war on superstition because you are showing them that a life without gods is a really good life. Okay.
Gotcha.
And I don't
My
buy
two
the
cents,
idea that
please.
I don't buy the idea that there's a class of people that need to protect other people from truth. I suffered many consequences, familial, friends. I had no work, all of it. I had no connections outside of Christianity, but I've now found a way, and I definitely do not regret the intellectual honesty. And man, I would be even more angry and more hurt. In fact, that's who I'm angry and hurt at, are the people in my life who were like protecting me from these ideas because they thought I couldn't handle it. So I don't think that's a class of people that we want to be. Sorry to stomp on
Cloud, I'm
Seth's
going to move
eloquent
on.
point with my. Go for it.
No, not
No,
at
no,
all.
it's fine.
My friend,
Thank
I
you.
got 4 calls left I want to throw in here. Do we answer your question enough before I move on?
Yeah, you guys definitely gave me something to think of. Thank you.
No, you're wonderful. Thanks for calling. Appreciate you much. What am I hearing? The bigotry of lowered expectations. This idea that some people need religion, or they're just not able to live without religion, so they sort of a bigotry of lowered expectations is always what I've been told, and you're saying that's just crap.
I don't like it. Yeah.
Okay. It's not that I think we live to make other people comfortable. I think sometimes, I was made uncomfortable and that helped me on my journey. I'm also a little bit resistant to the idea that, it's family first, because families often give themselves permission to say and do things we'd never allow from other people. If I'm on your biological family tree immediately and you are acting in awful ways, or you are judgmental, or your love is conditional, or you're shaming, or you're doing any of that type of stuff, I will pull the plug, right? Family needs to act like family. So I'm not willing to do too much. I'll bend a little bit, but I'm not going to surrender my own values to try to salvage a relationship that is essentially going to be one-sided where I'm doing all the bending. Kelvin from New Mexico. Thanks for waiting.
Can you hear me?
Are you there?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
What's on your mind? What's going on?
Well, the topic was, is there a problem with atheism? And In church today, they said we should, have compassion. We should care for people that are walking in error. And so here I am, with an opportunity to do something like that. So, my background is I was pretty much an anti-Christian for 34 years. I mean, give and take, give and take. And then recently, in the last 2 years, have become a believer. And it's been like night and day. It has been like death to life. And so if somebody's out there and they don't have any, if their perspective is leading them into darkness, then I just wanted to throw out there that Jesus does provide a perspective that leads to light, leads to life. And maybe that will be something, maybe that will be you. Maybe that's for you.
Well, let me make sure I understand, Kelvin. So you've called to tell us about the error of our ways and help bring us and help rescue us and bring us back to God. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Yes. So atheism is a belief, right? A lot of times atheists will take comfort in saying that they don't believe anything. They don't worship anyone. They don't have a God. But that's not really an option for any of us. That's one of the first dominoes that fell for me.
Well, hang on. Your premise is incorrect. We don't believe anything is an incorrect premise. It's an incorrect statement. If we don't believe in gods, we still may hold our values and believe in a lot of different things, whether it's love or self-generated.
I believe in anything. I mean God. Yeah. I mean worship God.
All right.
So when I realized that we do have to worship, we do have to. There is something that we have to. None of us has a choice. We have to dedicate ourselves to something that we take on faith. And we have to answer. We have to answer.
Look, Kelvin, I'm just going to stop you right here.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. But
you're talking to two people who probably know the Bible better than most Christians. We spent decades neck deep, eyeball deep in the faith. We have heard what you are saying so many times we could probably recite it back to you. We have all sinned and gone astray, and Jesus loves us all, and for God so loved the world. And I just think to myself, it is pretty presumptuous for you to call and tell us, hey, you, Seth and Paul, you're living wrong. I am here, a rescuer, to show you the way, and then essentially quote scripture to us.
Yeah,
we know that scriptures. We know what the religion is. We know what Christianity says, and we have
you don't know it. You don't. There's something about it that you don't believe. You believe in a lie. There is a lie that both of you believe, and that is why you are where you are.
What's that lie? What's the lie that we believe?
You believe that there's something more powerful than God. You believe in another God other than the one laid out in Scripture.
No, we don't. Where have I ever made that declaration? Where's Paul on record that there's something more powerful than God? Where do you get that information?
Well, if you believe in the God of the Bible, then you are afraid of him. And you guys don't show that fear.
That's not my question. That's not my question. What do we believe in that's more powerful than God? And where did you get the information?
The information comes from the Bible, right? So we all, the number one sin, right, is idolatry, worshiping something other than the God of the Bible.
Kelvin, you're reading the Bible to us again. What I'm asking you, and I'm going to have
all I can do
over in just a second. You're telling us what we believe. How presumptuous is that? Right? You don't know what I do and do not believe in. All you know is that
you don't believe in God, right?
I don't believe in any God, and I reject outright the idea of the Christian God because that God fails scientifically, historically, and morally. So quoting the book of your God to me carries no weight.
So those are the lies you believe. Those three things are the lies you believe.
these are empty calories that you are trying to feed us. And I simply say, this is not a conversation that's going to bring you any traction. Paul, did you want to jump in? I see you vibrating over there. Did you have anything?
No. I am only merely excited to be witnessing you in your master space. That's all you're
not
seeing.
At all. Kelvin,
go.
I heard somebody say once that proselytization is objectification. It was Dr. Chrissy Stroop who said it. You have objectified us. You have decided that we are a project, right? And so you are essentially colonizing
you are a project. Yeah, what I'm doing now is
into the
planting
faith.
seeds. I'm not necessarily trying to convert you now, but the seeds are going there.
Okay. So you see us as, I don't know, do you believe in a literal hell? You think we're going to cook in Hades forever, according to the New Testament?
It's up to God, what your future is. But yes, that is the future of people that he does not extend his mercy towards. It is eternal torment.
Depart from me, you who are cursed, into a lake of everlasting fire and damnation. That's Paul and me. We're going to cook. We are literally on the barbecue when the day comes.
And so will I. If I don't stick to the faith, that's going to be me as well.
Well, if you said the salvation prayer, you're covered.
No, that's not what I believe. That's not what every Christian believes.
Well, that's what the Bible says, right? If you
Bible
confess
does
with
talk
your mouth
about
that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved.
Right. So I think that a lot of things there are people that have problems with Christianity because, the people close to them have believed in maybe some lies, right? And I think one of those lies is this sort of like believing in a sinner's prayer that saves you for the rest of your life, and then you can go do whatever you want, commit adultery. And that's not
so
what's
it's
taught,
salvation
right?
through works, not faith. Is that right? I know faith without works is dead, which is a weird
So
verse.
what I do with faith and works are not something that should be separated. It's a false separation. We act on the things that we believe. The deepest things that we believe are the things that we act upon. So you can't have works absent from faith or faith absent from works. It's something that doesn't exist.
Preaching
Nobody
to me
believes
out of the same Bible that I could preach right back to you. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you don't understand how presumptuous it is for you to call and say you're a broken thing and I'm here to help fix you.
That's what the Bible tells me that you are. So I believe it. I mean, because it's been working for me. I mean,
well, fine. Then what you have also essentially brought to the table is you don't think Jesus is powerful enough or cares enough to be able to convince us on his own, right?
No,
Jesus doesn't care enough to manifest himself in front of me, because whatever it would take to prove to us that God exists, God already knows that. So God could come and essentially make it absolutely clear we have an epiphany. Yes, thank you so much. We will all go to heaven together. But instead, he sends Kelvin to make his case on an internet call-in show.
That's
by
where
quoting the scriptures that we already know.
Yeah, I mean, you know them, but what good is that doing you? I mean, there's a lot of people that know them, and it's not doing them any good. Like you go to school and you learn how they're not true, and that's not doing you any good. All that knowledge isn't helping you. But there is a knowledge that helps.
Is there any chance that maybe we know the verses better than someone else does?
I mean, the Bible tells us, if you know the verses of the Bible, you know that knowledge puffs up, and that children, the faith of children, is what we ought to have.
I'm going to put him on mute, Paul. I'm sorry. Be ye as little children, right? Belief over knowledge. What is it Christopher Hitchens said? It's called faith because it's not knowledge. It's an entire culture that tells us to distrust our own mind. Who has known the mind of God? This is cult speak, right? You surrender your own mind and take on group think, or the thoughts, the opinions, the values, the identity, the goals of the group leader. And I just don't think knowledge is the enemy of truth in this way. I will hand it off to you, Paul. Talk to me. What do you think?
I mean, obviously, I'm completely with you. These are not words. He's not uttering any words that you and I haven't heard. I am curious as to, it seems to me that Kelvin's strategy should not be to try to tell us the new words. It seems to me that the problem is that we don't believe it. He's trying to express that we don't believe it. And presumably that's a Holy Spirit issue, right? No one comes to the Father without the Holy Spirit being involved. And unless the Holy Spirit draws them, right, they will not come to me. I think Kelvin may have had more success in merely praying that the Holy Spirit would convince us. I think that that's what Kelvin would agree is the gap here. I'm also a little bit disturbed by, I assume that Kelvin agrees that we already believe, because we already believe in this God and are suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, that, Seth, you and I are unaware of our own thoughts. We are having thoughts that we're not aware of. And philosophically, the only thing we can be certain of is the content of our own thoughts. We can't know whether they're correct, but we can know the content of them. So if I'm sitting here and you're telling me that I already do believe in God, I'm just suppressing the truth, and I search myself and I don't find that thought in there, then am I to believe Kelvin's book, or am I to believe my own thoughts? The only thing I can be sure of is my own thoughts. I can't be sure of Kelvin's book. And now
Kelvin,
I'm
you
curious
wanna
as
weigh
to
in?
why Kelvin.
Go ahead,
Yeah, Kelvin.
So you're right. You're right about like the path that I was taking, and it's, as far as the Holy Spirit being involved, and what I can do is pray for you guys, and then it's up to God, because I do believe that His sheep hear Him, and that who He gives to the Son will be saved, and whoever comes to the Son will be saved, and that is the sovereignty of God. So the people that don't make it, they're held accountable for their sins, but it is a complicated issue. That's why we have Calvinism and all of this other debate.
So can we try a new tack? I just want to see if I'm curious, because I'm just curious. You said you went from a non-believer to a believer.
Yes.
What is that thing? What is the thing that for you, Kelvin, that you said, I don't believe any of this, but now I'm in? What was the straw that broke the camel's back for you?
Well, for me, I was, I was one of the foolish things of the world. And, I had tried a lot of things that didn't work, and I was looking for a great person, just a great man, not a deity or anything like that. I just wanted somebody to be a role model that I could follow as a role model. So I started looking at, there's a book about great men throughout history and heroes throughout history. It talked about different heroes, and then Jesus was in there a little bit. So I was curious about Jesus, and I knew a decent amount, but for some reason, this time when I picked up the New Testament and started reading it, it really just, I never stopped. And Jesus was that man, and then he became more than that to me. He became my God. But it happened gradually. It wasn't like it wasn't a flash of light.
Yeah. So it was it sounds like it was a qualitative role model. Is it possible that if you had, does that mean that what he said was true? The fact that you have found that it can change your life, so there's Chicken Soup for the Soul, or all kinds of different inspiring people. There's Tony Robbins. There's different people who have inspired people to change their lives. But we wouldn't say that fundamentally it's the truth. It's kind of what works for you.
Well,
so you gave us sort of this qualitative thing. I'll let you answer my question. Go for it.
He starts out, in Matthew, there's this Beatitudes, blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. That's a powerful statement.
Okay, but that's not truth, right? That's not a reason to believe that God exists. And that's, Jesus wasn't the first person to utter that kind of statement.
Right. Well, I don't know who else said it, but he says it's just the concentration of wisdom in his words is much. It's the densest concentration of wisdom I've ever seen.
What made you think that Jesus said those words? What convinced you that those were accurate recordings of what Jesus said?
I really wasn't worried about that. Whoever said this stuff, is Jesus to me. So, because the words are that good by themselves, they just stand on their own. And he said, heaven and earth pass away, right? But my words will never pass away. And for me, that's a profound statement because it matches up with science, thermodynamics,
Okay, but
everything.
Well,
you're aware
well,
that there's every holy book in existence has said something similar to that, right?
Right, yeah, like the new heaven and the new earth. I think the Norse mythology has something like that as well. But they don't have Jesus. They don't have this level of insight. So Jesus literally tells you like how to fix everything in your life. And then he's got the whole Bible to back him up.
So you just told me that you like the utility of Christianity.
Yes, the utility. Yes.
No, not that Christianity is true. In fact, you kind of said you don't care if it's true.
I don't.
What you care about was that it was you. Okay.
I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I do care what's true.
Then what?
I can't get away with saying I don't care if it's true because whatever the truth is, that is God. And I think you would agree with me that whatever the objective truth is, whether it's in Christianity or anything else, whatever the objective truth is, that is God, right?
No. No, that's just reality.
No. And actually what I heard him say wasn't that he didn't care if it was true. He didn't care if it was Jesus that said it. That's what I heard. But because it would still be his Jesus.
Oh, gotcha. So yeah, you're correcting me. Cool. Fair enough.
Is that correct? Did I get that right, Kelvin?
Yes.
Like, whoever actually said it, I don't really care if it was Jesus or not. I think I heard you say that, right?
Yeah, so the words are so good that it doesn't matter, if it was, it doesn't, I believe obviously that Jesus said them, because he says that
I'm not
words,
interested
the words
really in what you believe. What I want to know is this. If you had read these words, a variation on, let's say he was riffing on be charitable, be kind, blessed are the meek, all of these types of things. And they had been present, and they are in previous religions, be they Sumerian or North mythology, or I'm gonna just pick one, any one of the Hindu gods that said it. Would you then be a believer in that deity? Because it was the words themselves that inspired you.
The reason I wouldn't is because it comes with heaven and hell. So I don't see that concept in the other ones as much. And that's an important piece.
Well, why do you
right?
need heaven and hell to make the words valid and meaningful? Why would heaven and hell be at play? You're talking about values.
Well, it's like a carrot and a stick. I need that. I'm the type of guy that needs that. I need something to motivate me, and I need something to be afraid of, and it has both.
So on your own,
it's very practical.
You couldn't love, be meek, be charitable,
no,
do all of those types of things unless you were given either the opportunity for personal gain or the threat that you would be tortured. Is that what I'm hearing?
Pretty much. Yep. So, I would like to, before I used to say that I was a good person and I believed it, but now I realize that I was not such a good person. And that was counterintuitive to me because I thought I was a good person.
Well, if I may, I find much more satisfaction in good for goodness sake. I don't want to or need a jewel in my crown. I'm not going to respond to someone saying be good or I'll burn you. But the idea of living in an ethical, moral way, trying to minimize harm and maximize the joy in this life for its own sake as part of the human condition and a finite life, I find that much more satisfying and gratifying than any instruction, reward, or threat being handed down by a third party, deity, or otherwise. And I don't think I need to be rescued from that, Kelvin. I don't think I need to be your pet project. I don't think I deserve to be objectified in this way. There's kind of an implied threat that if we don't do it your way, that we are going to go and be annihilated or tortured.
That's a threat that you guys have to worry about.
Every face.
I don't have to worry about that threat at the moment, but you guys do have to worry about that. That is something that you have to sleep with. And
no, I
eventually
don't.
when you're on your deathbed, that is something you're going to have to think about. But
is this kind of
the Bible
I
talks
sense
about
that this
sin.
is almost like some kind of theological masturbation, Kelvin. What I sense is that at the end of the call, you're going to go back to your religious community feeling like you have done your job. You have the gratitude, the good feeling, the happy, warm fuzzy that at least you brought the gospel to the unwashed. You made your case, you presented it, and now the ball's in our courts, and you get to be a hero of the faith. I'm catching a little bit of that.
I mean, yes. I mean, I'm a laborer in the field, right? So it's my job to look on the field, see that they're white, they're ready for harvest. And you know, if all goes well, you guys will end up in heaven. We'll be there. We'll be there together, and we'll laugh about it. But if all does, you know, it doesn't end well, I hate to think of it. But
All right.
you know, the
I'm
nice
done.
thing about the Bible is
I
that
appreciate your call, but honestly, we have spent 20 minutes and far too much of it is us sort of being preached at with the Bible we already know. And I'm guessing much of the audience already knows. I do appreciate your call. Paul, any final thoughts before I pull the plug on this?
Keep praying for us, Kelvin. That's the only way.
All right. Take care. Thanks for calling. I feel a check in my spirit. I feel the conviction. Someone hold an altar call. We shall come for, like Paul. I was talking to Dan Barker, right? He was a pastor for decades, now co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And he says it like this, and I say it too. If I wasn't a true Christian, nobody was. I mean, I was all in. And so, Paul, if you weren't a true Christian, nobody was. So essentially what he is saying is, well, we're misrepresenting. We left because we got it wrong. You were counterfeit or deceived, or I mean, it's really pretty condescending to call and make us a pet project. And he admitted that we were. Paul, you're a pet project for these people.
Yeah. But he's got that new convert energy, though. So
was it a baby Christian? We used to call them baby Christians.
Yeah, baby Christians.
Yeah. They were all piss and vinegar, and they'd run around with the Bible, and they were ready to go change the world.
It's no different than the baby atheists. We do the same. Yeah,
it's true. It's true. I'm going to try to burn through these in relative short order, in order on the switchboard. D, is it Indiana? Where are you from, D?
Iowa.
Forgive me. I got it wrong. You're on with Seth and Paulogia. You here to convert us? You want to share the good news? What do you want to tell us today?
I want to kind of pivot a little bit because I'm exactly what Paul said. Baby Christians, please save us from baby Christians. No, I was Kelvin at one time. I was all in, charismatic Christian. As a matter of fact, I was very much on the front lines of the push for putting in Christian authority in government and that. I think now tell me what you think about this. This guy.
Hang on, real fast, and we need to probably find the point pretty quickly. Is there a television or radio on in the background? Something we can turn down so we can hear you better and better focus on the content of your call?
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
That is better.
It is better. That's not a great connection, but we can hear your words. That's the most important thing. Go ahead. What was your question for us?
All right. When a Christian says, they've been preaching at you and going on, and then he says, well, I'm going to pray for you. I kind of feel like spiritual assault. And I tell people, no, don't pray for me, because you're going to war over my mind and what I think, and that's not acceptable to me. What do you guys think?
Paul, somebody says, I'll pray for you. What do you do?
Well, you may have noticed, D, that I ended that last call specifically asking him to pray for me.
Yeah.
I used to feel as you did, that I used to feel bothered when people would say they'd pray for me, but I have now felt much more empowered if I just own that because ultimately I would think to myself, well, I think they're talking to themselves. I think they're talking to the ceiling. I don't think these thoughts are doing they're going anywhere. So I understand how what you're saying is, if someone's praying for you, they are inviting spiritual warfare into your life, in essence, even though they're cheering for the side they think is the good side. They're inviting, without your consent, hardship or malady or something, right? I get that.
Exactly.
But if we as a group don't think that is anything, then to react to it negatively to them, just in my personal opinion, and this is, every flavor is welcome here, but for me, it actually gives them more power, and that I'm kind of, if I'm going to complain that that's against my consent or that you're inviting malady into my life, it's actually to give power that their prayer might do something. When I ask them to pray for me, I feel like that is more off-putting for them. But ultimately, the flip side of that is, I want to know if Christianity is true and I am deceived, I want to know it. And words like the guy who was just talking to us, because we've heard all the words before, that's not going to cut it. So it actually does need a Holy Spirit. So for me, I've gone the opposite of you, and I'm not saying I'm right, but I've just fully leaned into it. Absolutely pray for me. Because
I like to gauge intent, D. Sometimes it's like bless your heart, right? Somebody once said, inside every bless your heart, there's a teeny tiny fuck you. And I don't know that that's true, but sometimes it's true. Because like if you go and you're sitting at dinner and somebody comes over and says, bless your heart, and they're just being kind, I gauge intent. If somebody comes over and they're like, oh, bless your heart, you poor, misguided, evil thing. Well, that's a different scenario. I think I have to gauge intent. And the same's true with I'll pray for you. We have a country where I'll pray for you is, for many people, how they have been culturally conditioned to express genuine concern. If they find out you're going into the hospital for surgery, if something's going on, and they say, I'll pray for you. I don't sweat that. Your heart's in the right place. I'm not gonna stop and have that conversation. There's a time for that. If somebody says, I'll pray for you, and they're being snide and dismissive, like I'm some broken thing, I don't sweat that too much either, because I know I'm not. But I think Paul's right. There may not be a wrong answer to this, but I think it's okay to understand what it is when people throw it at you like they're poking at you like you're a project. I'll pray for you. Maybe it's a conversation stopper. I don't know.
I agree with you, Seth. That intent is a large part of it, and I have people, when I'm posting in some groups, and they're like, "I pray for you" or "bless you" or whatever. I take that with a grain of salt. I don't mind when somebody tells me "Merry Christmas." It's the season, it's the intent in the heart. But when you've got evangelistic people, charismatic Christians, I'll just give you an example. I've had off and on contact with an old friend in the church, blah, blah, blah. They'd get in touch with me. And when I told them, basically, because inevitably they would be like, you got to go to church, you got to read your Bible, come on back to the faith, come back. And I just finally came clean to them about my lifestyle. I was like, look, I'm gay. I married my best friend, who they knew. I'm a pagan, and I love my life. I absolutely love my life. I wouldn't change anything about it. You can go on believing, but stop with, trying to drag me back. And they would just say, okay, I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. And I take that to mean, if you tell somebody, look, this is where I am. I'm happy here. I have no regrets. And they say, I'll pray for you. What they're praying for is to destroy the life that you have.
That's true.
And
in some cases, I think what they're saying is, I'll pray for you. I'll pray you will learn how absolutely wrong you are about everything you just told me. I get that. But Paul's right. Let them do what they're going to do. Let them cook in their own juice. It doesn't. What does that really cost you? And if they are violating boundaries, if they're coming across your threshold and beginning to try to diminish you, that's a different conversation. And I think that's when the harder lines can and need to be drawn. But just by listening to you describe it, Dee, I love your life. I think it sounds wonderful.
Thanks, Seth. It's very, very much a pleasure to speak with you again, and my first time speaking with Paul. But I love listening to you. I love listening to everybody. And thank you so much for what you do. You're an inspiration. You've helped me resolve a few questions in my mind, and I just continue the journey. Thankful that you guys are there to help along.
Well, you're lovely. Thank you, Dee. Thanks for
You're
the
a
kind
delight,
words.
Dee.
We'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
She can perhaps call back on a show where there is scientific niggling, and then she'll really be having a good time. By the way, I've decided if, I don't know what's going on in the Wednesday show, but if they can't find a host, call me. I will co-host on Wednesday, but only if you title the show Bunnies Under Dinosaurs, because I still have that on my notes. I can't let that go. All right. Only if it says Bunnies Under Dinosaurs. You got time, Paul, for two more before we call it a show? We've got
absolutely. Let's do it.
A couple of people who've been most patient. Chris has been on hold for about an hour. Chris, are you there?
Yeah. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Christian jihad. Look, I was raised in the church. I'm borderline. I'm a theist, but after listening to Kelvin and Matthew and one of the other callers, man, I'm ready to step over the line. I can't be. I can't be intellectually just. I think, and that's a problem with my family, with the people in the church. You know, it just and so, like I said,
hang on, Chris.
Yeah,
you're telling me you're a Christian, but after being on hold for a couple of calls, you're questioning your entire
no. It's built up.
Okay.
It's built up, but then it's like. These are the same illogical thoughts that or thinking that I have to deal with when I just am around the people at church and my family, you know. That you were talking about giving. I guess it was Kelvin. You know, he couldn't give without just giving from his heart. Not a brownie point to God. Just give. Why are you giving that homeless guy food? Because he's hungry. You know, and Christians that I'm around don't get that. Some of them just don't get it, and it bothers me. So it's time to just like let it go.
Come over here to the secular side. We have cookies, Chris. We have cookies for you. On your call description, it says something about Christian jihad. I heard the words come out of your mouth just to make sure we stay on target. What are you thinking? What's on your mind?
Yeah. Well, and I hear I use that term in my mind from listening to these Christians that I'm around, that the war that it's the right kind of Christianity. I'm trying to put it all together. So the evangelicals that I'm around, it scares me. They scare me because they want this war to end the world so they can get the rapture, so the rapture can happen. Some of them do. And here's my philosophy, and I'm not afraid to die. I've never been afraid to die. So I don't need to be involved in a religious war or any kind of war. If I die, I die. And now over time, I don't think that, I'm going to go to some heaven or something like that. But so many of these evangelicals that I have, been friends with, they're just the Roe versus Wade, the weaponizing of the First Amendment. weaponizing the First Amendment, and they want to create a war over it. You know, I do
let's
believe this
dial
is
you in just a little bit. Let me make sure let me try to
reel me
articulate or
in.
say back to you. Yeah, it's all right. That's what I do.
Yeah.
So
You
you were talking about, I think people, fundamentalists are driven by a great many motivations. I think there are some who genuinely are ready for the end of the world. And so if we see everything culminate in some sort of a Christian jihad, that is a precursor to the return of Christ, and they're ready for that. I think there were others who they're just fearful people and they're easily manipulated by those who understand the psychology of belief. I think there are people
Right.
who are just ignorant of science and history, who are navigating the world and led around by every piece of information. I think there are so many types of Christian jihadists out there preparing for holy war for a number of reasons. Paulogia, did you want to weigh in on this? This sort of
No, I'm
looking to the sky and waiting
still
for the
waiting
cloud to
to.
part kind of thing?
No, I'm a little bit unclear as to whether Chris is in favor of this Christian jihad or is
No,
against
I am
it.
not.
I'm
I am
still
not.
unclear.
I am not in favor of this. I do believe in a secular country where so many of these people that I have been around truly believe this country was founded on Christian beliefs. And no, the Danbury letter, the wall of separation of church and state, they don't. I've tried to help them understand. The Baptists were afraid of their own, not just Baptists, afraid of the other religions getting more clout in the government and pushing the Baptist out of the way, and that's Christian jihad in a way.
You called
that's
a
what
couple of atheists. You're a theist, as according to the call screen. So you called a couple of atheists just to commiserate about how poorly Christians are acting.
No. But I it scares me to see that there are people that are. I've asked them, "Will you die for your beliefs?" Yes, and I've asked them, "Will you kill for your beliefs?" And they go, "Yes." I'm stepping over. I'm not part of that anymore.
I mean, you didn't have to sell us. We were both against this behavior before you called.
Yeah, I know. But well, I think the topic was: is there a problem being an atheist? And
yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and so I see these people bowing up on atheists behind the curtain. You know, they're not saying, but they will kill for the beliefs. And I'd rather be an atheist now. Because none of the religion makes sense anymore. None of it does.
All right, Chris.
Like I
Well,
said,
let me just put a punctuation. I hear your passion.
Yeah.
I hear your passion. It sounds like you've been running the block. On top of that, I appreciate that very much. But I'm glad, honestly, that you're doing your own thinking on all of this. It sounds to me like you're on a journey where you're pursuing your own values, right and wrong, good for goodness sake, and that's a great place to be. Continue that journey. Intellectual honesty and humility, I think, will carry us a long way, and be safe out there, okay?
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, see you later. Passionate dude. Very, very excitable. He's right, though. What happens when someone tips over a rock and they see the devil under every one of them? And what happens when they have been primed to think that everything's a danger? I mean, I did a speech on the satanic panic, I remember, and when I was growing up, everything was of the devil. Everything, we were playing records backwards, for Pete's sake, and people saw the devil in books and video games. People wouldn't go see the movie Jumanji because that was somehow a Ouija board. And if you showed up at their house with an actual Ouija board, which was a piece of cardboard with ink on it, they thought it was a portal to hell. And if they think that all of this is coming to a head, and there is a literal beast who is attacking you and those you love and everything you care about, and those people are heavily armed, and they are further motivated by authoritarian, xenophobia, bigoted, racist, whatever thinking, it is a scary time. And so I understand exactly what Chris was talking about, but I also have some optimism, and I guess that maybe this is where you and I can wrap up. And I want to finish with your thoughts because I really want them. But I do see the rise of the non-religious in this country as being one of the reasons that the zealots are panicking the way they are, the way they've had to be so nasty and so freaky is that they look and they see that they're in the minority more and more every day, that they are becoming, I think they're, what is it, Chris, or Andrew Seidel says they are raging against the dying of their privilege. I don't know. Do you see them as the wounded animal, dangerous, but dangerous because they're wounded?
Yeah, well, I think there is certainly the extent that as they begin to recognize that they are no longer the cultural majority. Of course, it's almost silly to us to watch that things that when they no longer have a privileged position, they see it as some kind of persecution, right? Just being treated the same as everyone else is somehow harming them. That's bewildering. But no, I think you're right. I do think you're right. There's part of that to it. I think part of what resonated with me with Chris in that call was just the phenomenon of Zionism in America, and frankly, in my own circles as well, that um, Israel is going to be part of bringing the desired end of the world. And so, one of the ways they channel that bring on the end of the world energy is to unquestionably support a nation. Uh, and I think you and I would both say nothing should be unquestionably supported. Every bit of support should have caveats and questions behind it. And so, again, or similarly, like be it Donald Trump or Jesus or anything, if there's nothing that can sway you from your support of that person or idea, that's maybe a sign that that's a support that should be reevaluated, because there always should be some tipping point where you say, no, that's a bit too far. And sadly, we're not seeing a lot of that in today's world. So that would be my, I
You
guess,
know, the Bible
my final thought.
takes a hard line on doubt, doesn't it? You know, the Bible said the one who
Indeed.
doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind, and that person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. I talk about why Thomas is my favorite disciple or apostle or whatever, because he was the one who dared to doubt after the resurrection. He said, "Oh, I don't know if it's Jesus. Show me the nail holes. Show me the hole in your side. Prove it to me." And he wanted peer review. And that's why I love Thomas. And I remember talking to someone about the utility and necessity, even the beauty of doubt, and they just winced because for them doubt was weakness, right? If you're
Mm.
a believer, you're a mighty oak, you are unwavering. And so then I went through a list of all the other ways that we use doubt in our lives to keep us safe and happy. You know, somebody shows up at your door and they say, "Hey, I've got a lottery ticket that's worth $1 million. All I need your bank account number." You know, if we doubt that, if we teach our kids, if a stranger opens the car door, you doubt that you would be safe and you run the other direction. If you get that text that says, "Hey, we're updating your Google Drive listing, just send us your info," that doubt keeps us from being scammed. If we're in a relationship where we feel that we're being deceived, our doubt might help keep us from getting conned or scammed, even abused, whatever, lied to. We use doubt as a safety mechanism all the time for determining what is and is not true. And I think doubt has to be a critical and important element for how we address our religions as well. And I think a worthy deity would welcome doubt, would be like, "Doubt me. You know, I'm strong enough. I'm solid enough. I am so overwhelmingly provable that I welcome challenge and I will overwhelmingly make it so that everybody gets it. And there's no doubt or no question." So the idea that Jesus would chide people for having doubts or that any religion would punish doubt, for me, I think is that's a major red flag. Doubt is a beautiful thing. I mean, that's not an overstatement, is it, Paul?
Not at all. Doubt is a virtue.
Doubt is a virtue. Oh, that's another great show title. Doubt is a virtue. I guess we'll call it unless you have anything else you want to say or do, Mr. Paulogia?
No, I feel like if I've had you write 3 things down, so that's the most I can hope for.
Nuggets of wisdom. Nuggets of wisdom. Don't forget, we've got the late show. Is it late show after dark? What do we call the show at
After
7
dark.
o'clock?
Yep.
After, thank you. After dark. Coming up, Matt Dillahunty, Forrest Valkai, 7 o'clock Central, and then a long list of great shows going on all week long. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you to Paulogia. You are somebody I really look up to and just love to death, and I so appreciate your
Always
content.
a pleasure. I'm always excited. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. All right, everybody, be safe and well, and go look for some bunnies under dinosaurs. Yeah, and if you find them, call me. See you later.